Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
And I'm Rachel, Steven's wife.
Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. I believe it's your first time here.
First time on any podcast, period.
Nice. Breaking the podcast virginity.
You did a voice on the Methods of Rationality.
I did?
Oh.
Yeah. At one of the... we were
Good
at a party
Lord.
at Eneasz's, and you went and just did a quick line or two.
Yeah, okay.
And I can't remember who it was.
That was many years ago. I don't know either.
Remember that at all.
Yeah.
But that's ringing a bell now. Cool.
Nice.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Absolutely. This is 2 in a row now episodes where I'm not entirely sure what's going on, because the previous one, Brandon was interviewing me, and this one, like, Steven, you're like, this is a great thing. We should totally do this. So I feel like I am not driving very much. What is this podcast about?
I'll help get us going.
Okay.
You and I are... actually, all three of us are signed up for cryonics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have various optimistic estimations of how likely we think it is to work. What's your current, if you had to... throw a
Somewhere
number out?
between 0.5 and 5%
Nice.
is, how likely I think it's going to happen.
I'm somewhere between 5 and 10.
Okay. Cool.
And even though I don't think I've ever asked you to give a probability estimate, but if you had to throw a guess.
I would say I'm anchored at 0.5.
What?
Right on. So part of this will be cryonics related, but also you're an expert in people dying. And so...
She's killed a lot of old folks.
So, my body count is astronomical. It's disgusting.
What are you doing to these old people?
Nothing that wouldn't happen naturally. Just, I guess, a little introduction of myself. I'm a hospice social worker. I've been a hospice social worker for 6 years now. I've worked with the elderly population since I was 20, so that's going on 14 years. I guess I do know a lot about the elderly people and how they die, what dying looks like. I also have a vast network of people that I can reference and go to. I know morticians. I know other people that work in different states that work in hospice, death doulas, which is a thing.
How is that different from a hospice person?
A death doula is typically somebody that's not associated. In fact, it's kind of discouraged, at least in Colorado, to be both. So you are kind of hired. You're like a contractor. Anyone can correct me in the comments. We don't utilize death doulas because it's basically like we are acting as that, as our team.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're basically just a hospice social worker with a different name.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. I don't know as much as I probably should. One of our social workers is actually striving to become a death doula. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's not allowed or anything like that. It's just something that's already kind of being taken care of for free by Medicare. You have to pay for a death doula typically.
I get the feeling from the choice of the word death doula that it is a very hippie sort of thing.
I mean, you could probably say a little hippy dippy. I would actually love to know a little bit more or view how they engage with families. But from the very limited knowledge that I have, it's extremely similar to what we already do. They would come in and help the families and kind of navigate what the death process looks like and be a lot of emotional support. They would actually be more available than probably the hospice team. Like I come every other week sometimes for bill. If we want to get into the nitty gritty, billable is 15 minutes,
Wow.
But you can get above that, obviously.
Right.
And if a family needs me, of course. Yeah. So that's a teensy
With a
little bit.
billable of 15 minutes every other week, I'm assuming you can't really provide much emotional support at all.
Well, a lot of times the family isn't even there because I'm in nursing homes or assisted living. So I'm providing that care and the vast amount of my patients can no longer engage with me. So I'm providing a lot of, we call it compassionate presence, which is kind of a bullshit way of saying I sit there and my presence is known. I might play music sometimes. I might do something like that.
And it's only for 15 minutes at a time.
Not always. I mean, it really depends on what is needed in the moment. I never have a routine. I don't have a daily schedule.
I think that's your required minimum, though, right? And like the smallest
To
billable
bill
increment.
Medicare, it's
Yeah.
15 minutes, yes.
But yeah, sometimes you'll say you've been hanging out with this one person for 2 hours or something. Just 'cause,
Yeah. And, you know, if I go to a death, it's hours.
What's your average?
And average of what?
Average time spent with one person in one visit?
That's a great question. It really depends on where they are in their dying process. If they're still able to have a conversation and they do actually want to talk with me, that could take, 30 minutes, and then I spend time with the family. I had a lot of longer visits this week specifically for no particular reason. Like families just needed to talk to me more, or I had super alert and oriented patients that they actually can have conversations. That's actually pretty few and far between with hospice because we're coming in at the tail end of someone's life. Yeah. So I don't want to disparage the compassionate presence aspect of it because just knowing that I'm there is something that I firmly believe is helpful for the patient. But at the same time, it sounds a bit more, I don't know how to put it. It sounds, we have a lot of specific terms that we use in charting that if you break it down, it just means I sat by the patient's bedside.
I think that's incredibly valuable.
Thank you. Yeah. It can be, yeah.
I think that, and I've said this to her before, and maybe on the air, but like, could you ever do a job like that? Hanging out with dead people and or dying people and telling the families like, hey, you guys need to pick out a mortuary and like all the stuff. I don't think I could be near it. Like,
I think it would break me after a while.
Yeah. It's challenging in so many ways that because you're in it and you can do it, doesn't seem hard. The analogy I've used is like, a car doesn't feel heavy to Superman because he's used to it. Yeah. And so it's like, he's like, I could lift a mountain. The car is nothing. But it's like, you realize we can't even do that, man. I think that's kind of how I relate to you in your work.
Nice.
But I think part of this was precipitated. You read this book, and I forget the title of it.
I have quite a few, actually. It's one of my favorites. It's Haley Campbell's All the Living and the Dead. The tagline is From Embalmers to Executioners, an exploration of the people who have made death their life's work. She comes up from a British perspective, and she was speaking to, quite literally, men who have flipped the switch, as it were, for the death penalty to embalmers, et cetera, et cetera. Her very last chapter was about cryonics. Quite specifically, the Cryonics Institute, where Stephen and I will end up.
Mm-hmm. She went and toured the facility.
She went and toured it.
Clinton Township, yeah.
I have a joke with my family. My family is originally from Michigan, my parents, and I'm like, damn it, I don't want to end up in Clinton Township. I've been to Michigan. It ain't so hot. Sorry, Michigan.
And my joke is you always get to say, over my cold, dead body.
Exactly. In fact, Michigan is very hot. Never mind.
But your body be very cold by the time it gets there. So
I know. I signed up for cryonics August of 2020. Stephen doesn't promote things unless he believes in it. So we signed up. Then the longer I thought about it, I'm like, was that like a pandemic panic? Because my health anxiety since starting hospice has actually gone through the roof. Because every little thing is bad. Every little twinge, every little ache, every little whatever. Because I see the end result. And it's like, oh, well, it started with a cough or it started with a headache, you know?
But the people you see it in are so old that their systems can't take even a cough, right?
Well, my youngest was 20. It can happen at any time, not to be such a doom and gloom.
No,
but
some of it's just doom and gloom by nature. But it's kind of like, I was just saying with like the jadedness of police officers where it's like, they see scumbags everywhere because that's
all I see.
Their 9 to 5. When you see sick people, they're always dying.
Always, yeah.
And so, other than your occasional friend that you hear has a cold or whatever, but, almost all the sick people you encounter are dying ones. And so then you come to associate any illness with, they're terminally ill.
Yeah. We do have a thing in hospice. A lot of times with hospice, people get the individualized care that they do need, and they get the medication that they actually need, and they bounce back, and we call it graduating. And cool. You literally got too good. You are too well for us to convince our medical director and a third party that we go through to keep you. There's no reason to keep you anymore. You're too healthy now. Bye. Cool. You can always come back. That's also a fun thing in hospice, too. I've had repeat customers. So that's like, hey, I'm back, baby. So it was interesting to me to read about it. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes is another good book that I've read by Caitlin Doty. The internet's a little polarized on her. I love her. She started out...
We don't care what the internet thinks on this podcast.
I understand.
You enjoy what you enjoy.
I'm slightly curious as to what she did.
She, in my opinion, has normalized death, and she kind of... not commodified it. That's not the right term. She's very... you can look her up on YouTube. She has a certain aesthetic or vibe that people might not enjoy. But I find her very refreshing, and she's no bullshit. this is really what it looks like. This is really what we do to your loved one after they die.
And that's why the internet doesn't like her?
Oh, yeah, I'm not honestly 100% positive.
Okay.
My hospice social work buddy sent me it's an entire group dedicated to not liking her. And I'm like, well, that's a bit much, isn't it? But
Yeah.
That's how you know you've made it when you have haters.
She works in LA. She's lovely. It's called Undertaking LA is the name of her mortuary. What I'm getting at here, through reading those books and through also actually watching The Three Body Problem
Oh yeah.
and thinking about it, yes, there is a guy in there that he does consent to essentially being frozen, but it doesn't work. And he goes kind of floating off into space.
Not the direction they were aiming
Not
for.
what they wanted. They wanted him to go into space, but in a specific direction. It didn't work.
I'm assuming, since it's a story, he actually wakes up somewhere that's useful and not like out in the middle of nowhere to die alone.
It was the end of the season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to
find
wait.
out.
I know. But, and just talking with people at Vibe Camp a little bit, we had a really lovely man named Alex. He wanted to put together Death in the Green Fairy, which is my version of, like, I would phrase it as a death cafe, where you speak about death openly and answer questions about it and drink absinthe by a fire. And it's in nature. There's no, I don't know. It was just very, like, I've never spoken about it in that setting before, and I found it really cool. And I was shocked by how many people were actually coming up and asking specific questions. Clearly, people think about this all the time. And then we started talking about cryonics. It was like, what are your opinions on it? And I'm like, dang, I love Rudy Hoffman. You guys interviewed Rudy in the early aughts. I do agree with so much of what he said. I have notes on my phone, and it's like, we do view things very similarly. Human beings are like individual libraries of Alexandria. We're human libraries. We all have thoughts and emotions and lived experiences that are something that cannot be replaced.
She's talked to so many cool people, like people who worked on the atom bomb. I mentioned that she's taken care of at least one or two murderers.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
Quite a few. You'd be surprised.
If we have time, we'll touch on that.
People that survived World War II, Battle of the Bulge. I mean, I've worked with the oldest living Coloradan. She was 106. When else do you get an opportunity to talk to people like that? And it's not necessarily even the people that have had these amazing, extensive careers that have contributed to the society. It's just people that have had just fascinating average lives. The good death is when you're dying and you're happy with what you've achieved, how little or how great that may be. I find it so rewarding.
I'm feeling angry already, just like hearing
Dang
about people like this that have done things, and then it just gets erased. Like, no one should ever be dying, except maybe murderers. But
Some of them have good reasons.
oh well, okay. That's fair point. Yeah.
My take on it is that I look forward to the day where your job doesn't exist, because no one's sick and dying anymore. But as long as that's the case, people like you are indispensable.
I did listen to the episode with the Collins family. I do disagree with people needing to be productive members of society. I felt it was focused a lot on the economic value that someone could bring. Most of my patients would have, and I say this in the kindest way possible, nothing to bring in terms of like an economic change to our society as it currently stands. But they have so many other interesting things and interesting factors. So it's not just that. I do look forward to a time where death may not exist. I don't predict that will happen in my lifetime or in the next few lifetimes. I want things to be cured 100 million%. But that's where the cryonics discussion kind of keeps popping up in my brain. I read over their FAQ on their website. I've done research into the science of it and through the books that I did mention. And it doesn't add up to me. And there's a part of me that just, when I die, I want to be dead.
Okay.
Let me be.
See, I just don't want to die.
I don't want to die either.
Oh, okay.
I just know that unless there are massive changes that happen with science and medicine and with how the United States is currently running, I see us not getting the funding that we need, getting the collective support that would be needed for cryonics.
I mean, I think Stephen and me agree with you there. We're just gambling on there's going to be massive changes.
That's why our numbers are not double-digit percentages.
Like, I think all the science is fine. It's just I don't know if the changes will happen soon enough that that my body's going to make it that long.
I think another thing I wanted to ask you about to kind of get this rolling was on the Cryonics website, one of the pieces of advice they give is like, talk to your local hospital and, tell them that you signed up for this. And so and that's exactly the kind of reaction I knew you'd have. So I guess when someone dies, what's the process? Because like, I think the average, at least I certainly wouldn't have guessed most of the stuff. Like, I guess I never really gave it any thought.
Well, most people don't.
Right.
Why would you?
Good point. I guess maybe somebody's been around for the death of a grandparent, but I never was present when anyone. I mean, not even not like in the room, but like I wasn't even like in the same city or whatever when a grandparent died.
Yeah, unless you're actually signed up for cryo, there's no real reason to bother thinking about what happens when you die.
Well, yeah, we were talking about this a couple years ago. You were just saying, man, there's so many. Like you had some patient who their goal was to donate their body to science, and there was just so much fuckery involved that it didn't even they couldn't even do that. We can maybe do two scenarios. You're at home or at a hospital, and you're declared dead. Mm-hmm. So what happens when they are dead before the doctor shows up and everything like that?
Is this if they're donating tissue, their brain, or whatever, or they're just going to be cremated or buried?
Let's do the tissue donation. Somebody who has some sort of plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have limited experiences with hospitals because I don't work in hospitals and I never have. When somebody is on hospice, they die at home or they die in a skilled nursing facility, assisted living, or an independent living. So the process of that, they die. The brain stays alive for about actually 7 minutes after the heart stops beating.
That's terrifying.
There's an interesting article about that my mom found, and it was about the whole concept when people are like, oh, go to the light. Mm-hmm. Or it's like you see people like maybe actually when I'm in seeing somebody actively dying, there's transitions, there's sides of dying. There's a transitioning phase, there's an active phase, and then you're dead.
Okay, what's the transition and what's the active?
So transitioning, and I'll go back to Stephen's question in a second.
No, this is all part of it. Yeah. What I was going to suggest, and I didn't want to like prime the conversation that way, is it way messier than anyone would have guessed.
Yes.
So,
short answer, yes. So the transitioning phase is the last couple weeks of somebody's life.
Okay.
They stop eating, they stop drinking.
The body doesn't want to eat and drink anymore.
It doesn't need to. It's shutting down.
Okay. So that it's not like they're hungry.
No.
Okay.
If you offer food and they eat it, we have a thing called reflexive eating where they will chew and they'll swallow, but the body no longer is retaining those nutrients. And you can feed them plates of food all day and it'll actually make them sick because the organs are basically preparing to die.
What is the biochemical process behind that?
You know what? I wish I could speak more intelligently to that. I have some hospice nurses, this is their jam, and they could talk your ear off all day, and I love that kind of stuff. It's just not my realm.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's something kind of like when your body goes into shock and it brings all the blood to the core, stuff like that. So it's probably something akin to that where the body's just like, oh, we're shutting down. Like, stop pumping power to this and this. And
there's definitely, that happens a lot. I was explaining it to one of our interns a couple days ago. She asked why I looked at the bottoms of someone's feet. And I said, there's a process called modeling where all of the blood is being pulled to the vital organs and the body is saying, oh, something is happening. So we need to move as much energy, as much power as we can to the heart and the brain primarily. And so you'll notice changes in people's skin, cyanosis, the blue lips, the lack of oxygen that leads to changes in breathing. There are tons of different styles of breathing changes. I also preface it with families. Some people skip these steps and they just die. If I had a crystal ball, I'd be a billionaire and I wouldn't need to be a hospice social worker.
What is the psychology of the people undergoing these? Like, are they in distress because they're dying, or is there something that happens with the hormones that you don't feel scared?
So it can be either or. So there's something called terminal agitation. We see this a lot in younger patients where they're dying mentally, but their body is still physically strong. Not necessarily. Everybody's an individual. Everybody's different. They start pulling at their clothes. They start trying to hit us. They start getting very anxious. They need to move around. They're falling a lot more. I definitely think that something in their brain saying something is wrong, and they can't verbalize it a lot of the times. I'd say a good 99% of the time, they can't tell us what's wrong.
Wow.
Other times it's the classic falls into a coma, just kind of a deep sleep, that kind of a thing. That's the active stage is basically when they're no longer speaking, they haven't eaten or drank in days. And even like we have these little sponges and we clean their mouths out, and, you know, just for, it's a comfort thing. Any plaque, any gunk, even a little bit of water, that'll keep somebody going. The body wants to live, but it's being told you can't because of your disease process. Something I see the most is it's called Cheyne-Stokes breathing, where you have long periods of apnea, which means you don't breathe at all. And then the body wakes itself up again. I'm dumbing it down, and I'm also not a scientist, but you hear a lot of very quick breaths in succession. If you have like an EKG or an echo attached to somebody, the nurses can hear it with their stethoscope if they're actually like listening, but they can chart it on a monitor. You can see that. And it's just like a long line, and it's up, down, up, down, up, down, long line again. That's our indicator that they do not have long, like hours, hour,
so
not
the
plural,
actual
but
dying part can take as long as an hour, a couple hours?
Yeah, everybody, again, is different. If they're extremely frail, it can go pretty fast. We've had times where it's like, they're actively dying, they're dead. And they have skipped all those steps. Or they can be active for like a day. And the family is in this stasis where they're just like, the hurry up and wait. It's like, well, when's it going to happen? And so my job is to be like, you need to take care of yourself. You need to eat real food. Drink water, because they're running off of caffeine and a prayer. I've been in hospice, but I've worked with elderly people, and I've seen them die, and they weren't on hospice. But it happens more often than not when the family leaves the room, because the subconscious part of you, it's like that's still your dad trying to protect you from, hey, this is something that's about to happen. I'm going to shield you from it. I have seen the whole family gathered around the bedside, and then grandma takes her last breath, and it's just like, oh, she's passed away. I've seen that like 5 times in 6 years. It's typically like I went out to take a phone call. I went to the bathroom. And so I try really hard to not have them have guilt around that, because you were there for the entire other parts and the important things.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, I want to be there for their last breath. Right. And sometimes that simply does not happen. And that's something that I have to talk with them about.
This is just where I'm at again. Is like, I don't know how you can just go back and do that again on Monday. Like that, when my mom, she had these dogs that I think she got the one like my senior year of high school. She must have been, that would put her at like 17. And the other one was a year younger. And they both were put down this year a bit after they should have been put down. You know, their quality of life had dipped, but, you know, she'd had them forever. Somebody came to the house, 2 people for a company that did this. And I went for the first one when they went and put her down, and they came and they did the injections. They cried with us. They put her on like this nice little pillow thing and carried her out. And then, you know, we're crying, and I gave them a hug in the driveway. And then I looked at the clock. It's like 2:30. I was like, you guys are going to go do another one. And they're like, yeah. Like, that's their fucking day. Yeah. And that sounds like the hardest job ever. Maybe
I could not.
Right up there with people. I mean, you know, that's the hardest part of many people's lives is losing a loved one. But like, no, that's just, you're going to be there for that, and you've got 2 more of these to get to before the end of the day. That sounds insane.
I have that with people as well. Have a death in the morning. It's kind of a joke. It's like, I have to attend a death. I have to go, you know. Especially when I worked on call, that's all I did. I used to work night shift on call, 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer. And I was only called out for deaths, and I could have 3 in a night. Yeah. And so you're not sleeping, and all you do is make the phone calls to the doctor, to the coroner. At least in our state, you have to do that, and to the mortuary. And that's all I do. And it's like, okay, on to the next. So you have to compartmentalize it. Otherwise, like, I couldn't do this job. And some affects me a lot more than others. But if I'm being completely frank about, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but it's like, I literally couldn't do the job if I was constantly bereft. And it's like, oh my God, another human soul I can't. Yeah. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, I don't think people have we don't have the brain power to have that much empathy. Mm-mm. Like you hear about whatever, an earthquake in Haiti or something, and it killed tens of thousands. You might think, oh man, that's awful. And let's see what I'm gonna do for lunch today. Like, but
you still gotta eat.
Well, you still gotta eat. You still gotta eat, but also like you can scarcely imagine the death and suffering of one of those victims. Then if you add 80,000 more, like your brain just you actually can't multiply that feeling by 80,000, right? Yeah. There's just not enough brain in there to do it.
There's a ton of dark humor too. I've had transportation. It's typically not the mortuary, like the funeral director themselves. It's pretty rare in this day and age. But when they come pick up a body, ask me, where's the nearest Wendy's? Like, they gotta eat. Mm-hmm. And there's a ton of dark humor. And I had dark humor before this job. Mm-hmm. And now there have been times where I say maybe one or two things and Stephen will be like, Jesus. And I'm like, sorry.
No, so I've gotten used to the brand though.
I think humor's the greatest gift we ever received
as
a species.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
I think it was just surprising the first couple of times, but you mentioned like calling the coroner and the doctor and stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to imagine, and this doesn't have to like be the entire focus of the conversation, but maybe like one thing to kind of keep one eye on is like if I want to be successfully cryopreserved and I'm, in a skilled care facility because I'm dying of whatever. I mean, so I think the ideal circumstances to die under cryo is like whatever. I'm in a car crash.
No.
Well, not a car crash that traumatizes my brain or something, but like I'm alive, but I kept on machines, and somebody has time to call the Suspended Animation Inc., and then they show up, and then they're able to unplug, turn off the machines. Then I die. Doctor says, "Yep, dead." Right then and there, Suspended Animation can start pumping me full of cryoprotectant.
Right.
And then,
I mean, I think the ideal circumstance is that you're near the end of the life. Your brain is still active, and you're going to be dying soon, within a year maybe, because it's just on the way out, and so you sign up for one of those assisted suicide things, set a date and time, and have the doctor come out and have the team right there ready to preserve you, because otherwise it could be like hours, it could be weeks of your organs shutting down, and that's going to be doing damage to your brain the whole time as that's happening. Like, that's the really fucking scary part for me. Am I going to have the strength to be like, yeah, I probably got another year or two of life left, but I don't know how lucid I'll be and how well my brain is still going to be functioning that time, so I got to call it at some point. And do I have the courage to call it now and just be like, next week I'm going to be dead and the team will be here and they'll freeze me? Because I think that's the only really high chance way of getting preserved.
Well, so I think there's some low thousands of people currently preserved, right?
Yeah.
So I found on their website that there's currently 229 bodies successfully preserved. This was updated September of 2022.
Is that in CI or everyone? Because Alcor, I think, is slightly bigger than CI.
So this is just CI.
Okay.
That's the only one I looked into because that's the one that we'll be going to.
Yeah.
And that's since 1976.
That's pretty low. I'm not sure.
There hasn't been a lot of people signed up until the last few years.
Yeah.
And luckily many of them haven't died yet.
Yeah.
But even so, there's still that's way lower than I thought. Actually, I know Alcor has more. But I guess so.
It's actually higher than the number that was originally posited. It was like at 100. I'm like, that can't be right. And so I did more digging.
Oh, nice.
And so you were speaking to, talking about medical aid in dying, that became legal in Colorado. I have had a fair amount of patients go through with it and succeed. When I say succeed, I mean you can get the prescription and not take the medication. Some people just want that, I don't know what to call it, just sense of peace, knowing that I could fill this at any time. Some people even get it filled and have the medication.
And I think there's some security just knowing
Absolutely.
that I have authorship over the last decision of my life.
It's the autonomy.
Are they pills?
Does provide. No, it's actually a cocktail.
Like a cocktail is in a drink?
Yes. So it's powder. It is enough medication to kill any adult. The fastest I've seen it done is 7 minutes. And that is the death process from the time she ingested it to she is proclaimed dead. That's the fastest I've ever seen it, and it was kind of an extenuating circumstance. But you mix it, you have to ingest it yourself. Someone can't like tip it into your mouth. Us as hospice workers, we cannot be in the room. It's not like we would be culpable or anything like that. It's just one of those rules that we have.
What's nice about you not being allowed to be in the room is that if the person can't fully, I think they have to demonstrate to the doctor to get the prescription that yes, I'm able to pour stuff in my mouth or whatever, but if between then and the time they want to take it they can't, then a family member could help, and you guys can honestly say I didn't observe them helping.
We literally have plausible deniability at that point. Yeah, for sure. Some people wait in their cars, like they quite literally, they take it very seriously. So that was actually a point of contention I had with cryonics, is because I know what is in that made cocktail.
Yeah.
And then the cryonics, so when I was looking into it, when they were cooling the patient to slow the molecular motion, all of the things that they have to do to actually put someone in a state of cryonics, I don't really know. Cryopreservation, thank you. So if you've already ingested the made cocktail that is current in 2024, the entire purpose is to kill you.
Yeah.
And then to have a separate team come in and then try and cool everything, I literally do not understand how that would work. I had Stephen ask Rudy, who, shout out to Rudy, lovely man, and thank you for all the Blue Mountain e-cards that you send us. I don't understand, even if science could figure out a way to bring me back to life, as it were. I'm using that term, I guess. If I've already ingested the made cocktail, plus all of the things that are involved with cryonics and their way of the vitrification and the cooling process, I don't know what would be left of me. How are my organs even going to function?
Oh!
The purpose is not clear to me.
There's a couple answers that I wanted to get on. So Rudy, I think, has a different view of that future than I do.
Yeah, Rudy's shares the CI view, I think.
So does CI also think like you're gonna wake up in your old meat suit?
At least the people that started it. I mean, I know that the guy, the original, I think, forget his name.
I had it written down.
Yeah, but he died not too long ago and was preserved. But yeah, that original crew all was of the idea that they're going to be waking up again in their original meat suit, which I think is silly.
I don't see that's part of my answer to like how medical science, like, because the thing is, not only were you already dying, but then you took this cocktail of shit that is designed to kill you extra, and then you're pumped full of deadly cryoprotectant that would have killed you even if you were healthy.
Yeah.
And so to restore that body would have to fix all three of those things plus aging.
Yeah.
And so
that body ain't coming back.
That seems like a stretch. I mean, they're barring cool sci-fi nanotech, but it seems easier to take the brain that is mostly intact and find some reasonable simulacra of that you could either make through really good really good imaging to just build a new brain part by part that exactly matches the old one. There's different approaches to that. We talked with Robert McIntyre about, it was some plastification of like the entire connectome of the brain rather than just pumping it cold and doing that. But since there's no company to sign up to do that yet, I'm still with the Cryonics Institute. Yeah. But I think Robert's approach seems promising. There's that aspect, and I want to talk more about that too if you'd like, but I guess I wanted to just hit on the beat of like one thing that seems to be a hang up of like the average person who even wants to say donate their body to science, unless they are able to take a cocktail. And like you said, if you're just like really, really old, the doctor won't give it to you. You need to be terminally ill. Okay. Granted, you could kill yourself through some other way, but then the legalities of CI being able to take away your, recently suicided body is different.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should move to Canada.
Maybe.
I hear they just offer people suicide whenever.
I think
I'm pretty sure it's
more complex, but yeah.
I'm sure it's exaggerated. But if the internet has not lied to me, then I can just drive up to Canada. No, never would. You just drive up to Canada and be like, I feel like killing myself this weekend. Can I get some of that?
And then it's a short drive from there to Michigan.
Right, yeah.
My parents used to be like, hey, let's go to Canada, get some beer. But no, it's all extremely interesting to me. I want to wrap back around really quick because you want to talk about like the actual process. If someone's at home or in a hospital of dying, or would you like to do something different?
The reason I wanted to hit that beat is because and the definition of dead moves as time has moved. Used to mean your heart stopped and you're dead, but now that's, not that big of a problem. But whatever, you're dead. It could be some hours before somebody notices.
Can I ask a follow-up question before we go there?
Yeah.
Since at least one of your objections, it seemed, was the fact that, like, your body is fucked, how are they possibly going to bring it back? Do you feel any differently about cryonics if you... Well, first of all, how do you feel about the idea that you're going to get a different body entirely just, like, regrown from scratch? And would that address any of those worries?
So one thing I spoke about at Vibe Camp with some people is my concern of, and my brain just goes to these scenarios, right? Maybe I've seen too many sci-fi movies. Maybe I've seen Futurama one too many times. But like the heads in the jars, it's like, I don't consent to that. I am not a specimen. I am not going to be in a museum. I'm all that stuff. And so if they were to bring me back and it's 500 years in the future and I don't know who's in charge or what their like intentions are, that kind of thing. My concern would quite literally would be like an idiocracy scenario where everyone doesn't have maybe the best intentions and I would be kept alive against my will, or they were doing experiments or something. And it's like, hey, this person died in 2024. Let's see what's going on. To have somebody else's body, to your point, like to regrow one or something like that, I don't really have an opinion one way or another, I guess because I would be alive. That would be interesting. I don't want to be some AI metaverse voice with all my thoughts and whatever, because that's not living. That is something completely different. I'm kind of against that as well.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'd want to be a brain in a robot body, for instance. I don't know. I kind of just, there's a large part of me as I'm getting older, and I'm not even that old, but it's just like, let me go. Yeah. I mean, like, this is not me, Rachel, the human being, my spirit, my essence, my whatever you want to call it.
If you got your body just the way you are right now, regrown but healthy, would that be fine?
That would be lovely. Okay. I mean, just kind of getting rid of some of these aches and pains that I already got. And if hopefully I don't have any demeliorating diseases that are popping up. And if they can cure all the things that I might have at age 80, knock on wood, you know, sure. I'm down for that. That's totally fine. What are the odds of that? That seems...
somewhere between 0.5 and 5%, if you ask me.
Apparently, yeah. Fingers crossed, right?
This is where, like, if you... Maybe this would have been a fun exercise to do before we started actually recording, but, there's 6 or 10 things that would have to happen for a good cryopreservation and restoration to happen. And among those include things like society not collapsing, society being in a state that will not only be able to wake you up, but one that you'd want to wake up in.
Right. And whenever people bring up that particular scenario, my go-to, I want to say response, I don't always say this, but just what I think is, in a society like that, they don't have any reason to wake you up. They're going to stop spending the resources and throw your body out so it rots, which sucks because bringing someone back is going to be expensive, and they have plenty of slaves that are just getting born, or they can grow their own, apparently, if they can grow your body.
Right.
Grow an obedient little slave.
That's why I don't worry too much about the scenario where, like, I wake up in a dystopia because,
the only society that would wake you up is one that actually is a good enough society that they want to do that out of altruism.
Right. Yeah. And so that helps me feel good about that part. So that's never been too big of a concern of mine. Like that, you have to weigh how likely you think that is to be that future is. But I don't worry about being woken up to a world where I don't consent to being alive and they're doing terrible things to me, because it would be way easier for them to do it to something else. Right. They could have whatever slave babies that they do all this terrible medical science to or something, right? Yeah. Why would they go through the expensive process of bringing back a frozen person? Right.
For every Stephen that they can torture, they can have 1 million new babies instead to torture.
So that one doesn't keep me up at night, but...
So just like global warming is my big thing. So like Michigan's surrounded by water, yeah. So it's like... What I love about Stephen is he is rose-colored glasses, glass half full. I do try and be more like him. We've been together for a hot minute. But there's some part of my brain that just sometimes is glass half empty. And so I'm like, okay, so with the climate crisis that is clearly happening in other countries now in 2024, they are running out of room. So they are moving already... people that have been dead for 50, 100 years. And I'm talking more about smaller islands, places like Spain or in other places like that. And it's just kind of acknowledged that this is the norm. It's a cultural norm. Caitlin Doty also has a fantastic book about that as well. Different cultural views of death and how they handle the dead. Yeah. It's like, this is a thing. It's like, grandma will be moved probably 10 times. She will not have a, quote, final resting place. There's literally not enough space for her. Mm-hmm. So with cryonics, the mechanisms in which they keep these people cryopreserved, the actual containers on Google, on their website, seem huge. Yeah. And so I'm like...
They have a number of people in each one, but yes, they're large.
Gotcha. And so that's good to know. Yeah. So again, there's a negative, but maybe practical for maybe no particular reason, part of my brain saying it's like, so they're just going to move them? If the waters start rising, for instance, or there's an earthquake and half of Michigan drops somewhere. Yeah. My brain just goes through all of those things because...
I mean, that's where a lot of my 98% failure came from.
It's like, what is the earth going to dictate, frankly? Because people certainly aren't helping at the moment. Right.
Like, again, if it was just the science, I would say 100%.
Right.
Of 100% it would work. But all the thing that it might not work is environmental problem or society collapses or the institute goes bankrupt, something like that.
Yeah, if Michigan starts going underwater, like they'll start trucking the bodies somewhere else and truck could tip over on the highway and then you've lost all those people.
Right.
The way I think about that is like, I'm already dead.
Yes.
And so, I
literally cannot get worse.
Right. All that's going to happen is I'll stay that way, which is,
and the life insurance policy will go too.
Well, yeah, I mean, and
that's the way I look at it. It's a gamble for a very small chance to live possibly forever, but it's high enough, like it's at least 0.5% in my opinion, that it's worth a few tens of dollars a month.
And that's where I'm kind of sticking around. I mean, I'm literally dying to know if this works, right? And so, hey, Cryonics Institute, please take me. Please don't use this as ammunition. Be like, damn, that Rachel, she freaking messed that up. No, I'm just kidding. But
they're like the soup Nazi of cryo.
Gosh.
No cryo for you.
Gosh.
No, they're cool about it.
No, they're chill, quite literally. And so it's like, I'd like to visit them one day. It's quite literally when people go to a regular old mortuary, it's like, what's this going to look like? Where am I going to be? I'd like to go one day. I'd like to go. I've never been to Clinton Township. I hope it's a lovely town. We'll just see how it goes. Colorado has so many different kinds of ways to die. There's terramation, you can become compost, aquamation, which is a lot more environmentally safe than normal fire cremation. Aquamation is becoming more and more prevalent, which I love.
Is that where you, like burial at sea kind of thing?
It's not burial at sea. It's quite literally a container that you are put in, and then it dissolves, and then the bones are crushed, and so you're a beautiful white powder instead.
Okay. The Breaking Bad method of getting rid of people. It is kind of like
that. I've taken the tours, and it does have Breaking Bad vibes. They have to have special permits, so they are in like very industrial parts of Colorado. So it's not exactly aesthetically pleasing, but what they're doing is important work. There are places that you can be buried, especially on the Eastern Plains. So Colorado is very progressive in that sense, but I have never had a patient that has signed up for cryonics. It's a very, very, very niche thing. If I mention I'm signed up for cryonics, people within my own field kind of balk at it. And they're like, that's weird, which is funny because we deal with literally every other kind. And so I think the buy-in for society as a whole is going to be a massive hurdle. And cryonics is not advertised. I initially thought this sounds a little snake oily. I updated because it's like I heard about it. I am going to assume through Steven, who heard about it through maybe some other friends.
Less wrong.
Less wrong. Cool. So they're not taking out ads on the side of a bus or something. It's like, hey, come freeze your body. It's nothing. It's not like that. But the societal buy-in of all of this is huge. I would love to see it happen, actually be present at someone dying and then get to see suspended animation come in, do their cool thing, and then see the Cryonics Institute do their part of it. I have no idea if that's something even available. Probably not at this juncture, because seeing is believing in its own way. And kind of going back to Stephen's question about what does death actually look like, we're quite literally human. And so somebody could be dead for 6 hours, especially in a skilled nursing facility. Not to disparage them in any way. It's more assisted livings or independent livings where they're not getting checked every 2 hours.
Right.
Or family isn't at bedside. The facility finds them, so we have to guesstimate. Their estimated time of death is literally like ETA or ETD. So the facility calls us. We come out, depending how far away the nurse is, if it's a triage nurse, if it's the day shift nurse. Wherever they live or wherever they're currently located, that's also more time. You show up, you say, yep, they do their assessment. I was going to say, it looked good to me, but they do actually assess you. No one has woken up, like, oh no.
So I know a bunch of people who have signed up for cryo do have like request of, if you find me dead or if I die, please immediately pack my head in ice, get some dry ice, whatever. Would you not be allowed to do that until you get the other nurse out to do their assessment?
I have those cards in my wallet, so if I drop dead of an aneurysm, which would suck, but maybe, the EMT checking my wallet, it's right behind my driver's license, but it's also in its little frame thing, so they might be like, oh, there she is, and she's not an organ donor. That might be the one thing they might look at. If you want to donate your tissue, donate your brain, you have to tell us. Otherwise, we are not going to do a single damn thing to preserve you.
Okay.
The last time someone donated their brain was years ago. This was during COVID. And so again, my view is skewed. They packed him with like literal ice from a gas station. It's nothing fancy. It's ice.
Whatever to cool you down.
And is it cool enough? I don't know.
Right.
We're not taking temperatures. We don't, we're trying.
So you were able to do that?
We were able to do that. We do not know unless we follow up after the fact if it was a viable.
Right.
If it was successful.
Okay.
Yes, we did our part. Yeah. We transferred them into their care. We did all the stuff.
I'm just very happy to hear that you aren't required to let them stay warm and dead until someone else shows up.
No, that wouldn't really make sense, especially when things start shutting down, even like what I was referring to before. It's like, oh, they feel cold. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, everything's shutting down. The perfusion is gone. Like, the blood vessels are not trying to expand.
I want to hit that beat again. So, about being required to leave them warm and dead, doesn't a doctor or somebody have to show up and declare them dead before you can start doing stuff to them?
So, a doctor would not show up. It would be our nurse.
Okay.
If they are on hospice. If you get hit by a bus, then it's going to be the coroner or somebody like that.
Let me just kind of play this timeline out. It's like the person dies at midnight, and they're lucky enough that, within 5 minutes, the nurse that checks on them every 2 hours comes by and like, oh, they just died. They make a phone call to you guys.
Correct.
And then, all right, we'll have a nurse out there. She lives 45 minutes away. Mm-hmm. In those 45 minutes, is the person at the nursing facility allowed to do anything to the body?
So they're not allowed to do anything. For instance, like, I have a fun story about when I first started in healthcare, period. There's a thing, we haze our healthcare workers. I don't, for those listening. But I was told, hey, this guy died. This is in a skilled nursing facility, or SNF is a shorthand for that. Hey, this guy died. Go take off his jewelry. Take off his wedding ring. His wedding ring, take off his watch. And I went in there, and rigor mortis doesn't set in until I should have come a bit more prepared with the numbers, but it's not
it's a few
immediate.
hours, right?
Mm-hmm, yes. So you can still move things, but he had edema, which means swelling. He had fluid. And so I was twisting, and I was trying to move, and I got it off.
Okay.
That's not my job.
Okay.
That is either the family, if they really want it, or the transportation company. They make a note of your jewelry or all the things, and then they will give it to the actual funeral director, who will then, they have tons of different ways of getting things off cleanly. And then I came back out and the nurses were like, we can't believe you did that. And they were just like laughing. I'm like, I'm 20. I love this for me.
Rude.
Where was I going with it?
The initial question was...
if you're like moving the body
you're discovered dead by a medical professional at a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living or something. And then they call the hospice people. Then I was wondering, are they allowed to do stuff to you and like before you're declared dead by somebody who's qualified?
Specifically, like, if I'm there and I told the person, hey, if you find me and I'm dead, I have 2 5-pound bags of ice in the freezer. Please put them, above and below my head.
Yeah, so in that case, yes.
Oh, okay.
We even had it in a freezer by his bed.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh.
If you guys have like specific requests, for some people have religious reasoning behind those things. Some people want to donate their things to science. For sure.
Oh, you checked the religious box, didn't you, on your CI paperwork? I think we talked about that. Yeah, I think I did too.
Yeah. For religious reasons, I need to be preserved, which is, one of the great things that could be a value that a rationalist religion brings is that, now this is actually part of your religious beliefs that your body needs to be preserved this way.
Yeah, because they'll do more medical bending over if you say it's for religion. Yeah. I also checked that box. I remember feeling disingenuous about it.
Well, which works better if there is an actual religion.
That's true.
Right. I don't know if I did that.
But I think you did. I think you asked me which one to check, and I suggested. But the I guess so. At first, I was under the impression that they weren't allowed to do stuff to your body because the CNA who finds your dead body isn't qualified to determine if you're dead, and if they pack your head in ice and then that kills you, then they can get in trouble. So I wasn't sure if they were like allowed or inclined to do stuff until somebody shows up who can say time of death or whatever.
Gotcha. So a registered nurse has to actually like come in. Assisted livings tend to have one like on staff. I should know this answer as far as like an independent living scenario. If we're talking cryonics, it's like you would have to have that like posted somewhere and people would need to know what to do with you. I've never heard of people just randomly putting ice on someone's head or that kind of a thing. And a lot of people that die at home, it's interesting. I think they do this automatically, but it's like, I want to donate my corneas. I want to donate tissue, that kind of stuff. And that stuff deteriorates faster. And so timing really is of the essence.
I guess I wasn't sure if the person who discovers you, if it's a home patient, I guess I'd be willing to argue with the judge that they told me to do this to them,
Yeah.
And I thought they were dead. Yeah, that helps too.
Please write things down.
Yeah. At the end of this, I want to go through a list of what steps would you recommend taking for a higher odds of success? But I'm trying to figure out if I'm at a skilled nursing facility, they know my wishes, but it's just some CNA who finds me. I guess they call the RN the registered nurse on staff, and like to come over to that side of the building and check me. That could take 5-10 minutes because. Less? Oh, that's good. I wasn't sure if they would run like in the movies because they're already dead. So
trust me, if someone's running, we think you're an asshole.
Good.
There better be a damn good reason for you running through a nursing home.
You could crash into somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some old person wandering out of the room, you could kill them. Yeah. So
quite literally.
Running in medical facilities is a movie thing. I guess I'm relieved to hear that you don't have to be pronounced legally dead before somebody in the room can start doing something to prep you for cryo.
My last personal engagement on that kind of thing was literally years ago. Maybe things have changed a little bit, but because we knew it was coming and family was around, he was checked by an RN and it was just like, yes, he's dead. And she checks for a pulse. She checks all the things.
This was the brain donor guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then you put ice around him. But yeah, I mean, it takes time from the time, like by the time I get to a facility where someone's home, the nurse is typically there, not always. Sometimes I beat them.
Is this all the post-moment of death fuckery that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you're kind of milling around, wait, I can't pronounce person. That's simply not something a social worker can do. The nurse then calls the doctor to say, hey, this is around the time we think it happened. This is the time I'm calling it because this is when I assessed them. The doctor says, yeah, that sounds about right. Or they can challenge it and be like, okay, well, maybe it's a little earlier, X, Y, and Z. That's what's going to go on the death certificate. That then prompts us to call the coroner in whatever county it's in. The really, really big ones, it's literally a single form that you fax. It's very basic. Some you physically have to call, and they ask you a ton of questions. Typically, hospice is the magical word. It wasn't like an accidental murder. Like, it wasn't, she was 90 years old and she had Alzheimer's. She was on hospice, and I'm the hospice nurse. Okay, cool beans. Awesome. Then it's up to the family. Do you want to call the mortuary right away? And again, the hospice is calling. We're doing all these things on behalf of the family. They don't have to remember all this stuff.
So a family could do this if they wanted to on their own as well?
We've had that in the past. We discourage it because they often ask questions the families can't answer.
What kind of a question?
Time of death, if it isn't called by a doctor, families can guesstimate, and it is what it is. But they're asking about comorbidities, things that might have contributed to them dying. And
like the pillow I was holding over their face.
I've had one or two. No, I don't know. Not the pillow. Not the pillow yet, but I've had some other eyebrow raising ones where I'm like, like their primary hospice diagnosis. You'd be shocked how many families don't know why their family member's on hospice. They just know they're dying.
Oh.
And they might say Alzheimer's, which is fine, but we have a different diagnosis. We'll say cerebral atherosclerosis. We'll say Lewy body dementia. That's different. It's an umbrella term that the family has probably heard thrown around a lot. They want the actual ICD-10 code diagnosis. And we don't want families to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I mean, our job is to put less stress on the family. So please let us do our jobs and call these people. I've done it many times before, and I have the access in my computer to look that stuff up. Typically, the nurse does it. But I will step in and be like, yep, this is what's going on. Then in Colorado, at least, we have, there's no law saying you have to get the body out within X amount of time. It's more of a religious consideration. Like with Judaism, it's like we have certain rules that we have to follow.
If it's not a cryo patient, how long before a body starts becoming a health hazard? If it's left where it is?
It's a little bit of a misnomer. So like I've heard in the past, it's like, oh, they're starting to smell. So I'm inhaling or whatever, toxic chemicals or something.
I'm breathing in deadness.
Yeah. That's not really going to hurt you. Once they start to actually like, there's a fancy term for it, but like disintegrate, congeal. I've seen that. It's hot. They died in a recliner. They were found 12 hours later, something like that.
So it can be as soon as 12 hours from death.
It can. So people start to stink like an hour after. Okay. Just because gases are literally being expelled. And a lot of times people, if there's anything in their bowels, they evacuate them. So we clean them up. I don't do that particularly. I will help dress somebody in a specific way if they want. I'll help the nurse however she needs. Rotating, literally moving dead weight is extremely difficult to do. I've helped move people onto gurneys if they don't bring two people to move a person, which is hard. I wouldn't recommend it. Shout out to the people that can do that. But I've done it. So a lot of times families have said their goodbyes and all that stuff. And so they say, okay, call the mortuary. The mortuary does not come right away. And I'm very clear about that. This is not, they're going to be here in 5 minutes. Right. It's like an hour and a half. If they're an hour and a half away on another call, we're just going to sit here. Literally. There's nothing else to do. Like you can start calling family. You can do all the crappy stuff that you don't feel like doing, but you can just sit and hang out as well and reminisce and swap stories. It's a process. Like that's my too long didn't read version of like, this is not cutting like, oh, we're done in 30 minutes. Like there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different agencies involved. And that's another thing with cryonics where I just, unless I am in the perfect condition in the like hospital bed and suspended animations right there. And it's just like, honestly, I'm not quite sure how this would even succeed. Clearly people have been put into this cryostasis and that's okay. But it's just like, I would love to know like how well it actually went. And what their brain and bodies actually look like. I guess we'll never know until they're unfrozen, basically.
They do have reports after every cryopreservation with like how things went and how well they rate that it went. And not all of them are great.
Yeah,
but
understandable. And just like all the deaths I attend, it's a comedy of errors sometimes, and it's just like, oh my God, and it's just we try our hardest, just like they try their hardest. Like
in the U.S. though, aren't the majority of deaths either in hospital or in hospice?
So I don't know, like, numbers. A lot of death does happen in hospitals, obviously, and a lot of times we get people on hospice because the hospital wanted them out. It looks bad for their numbers.
Okay.
It's like, oh, X amount of people died on this wing of whatever disease or whatever. Discharge home stat.
Yeah.
Get them out. Turn them and burn them is a phrase. Get them the fuck out. And I'm like, that's fair. And no shade, because I have friends that work in discharge in these hospitals, and it's extremely difficult. I would never do that job. It's too hard.
Yeah. That's one of the things that made me a little more optimistic about cryopreservation, because due to reading lots of fiction, I was like, oh yeah, everybody dies of some terrible tragic circumstance in a fiery accident or gunned down or something. And no, it turns out that the vast majority of people in the first world die either in a hospital or in hospice, where it's known that you're dying. And so it makes it much easier to have the cryo team there.
Death by, crushed by falling piano doesn't happen too often.
Not as many anvils as I thought growing up, Yeah.
I meant to mention this before, but you mentioned that the fastest person you saw die after taking the made Metagladen dying cocktail was 7 minutes. Can't it take up to 6-10 hours? Like,
if you do it poorly. So there are very specific rules about, like, when is the last time you can eat, for instance. The reason it took that specific patient, it took the rest of the day to die. She was walking around, actually it was literally like a pregnancy. Like, you're trying to get the ball moving, you're trying to get the baby out, you're bouncing on the ball, you're moving around. I've never had kids, but I've seen enough Keeping Up with the Kardashians where they do a lot of that.
Trying to trigger labor.
She was trying to trigger death. She's like, why isn't this working? Well, she ate an entire meal and then drank the cocktail, so it was fighting.
Take it on an empty stomach.
Yeah.
Is it okay to have like a few shots of alcohol beforehand?
Actually, that's probably one of the main reasons it took 7 minutes, because she mixed it with vodka. I digress.
So I guess to get back to the original cryonics topic, how does all the things that you know about the dying directly impact your thoughts on the cryo?
So there's some kind of like esoteric, like, what's it all mean, man, kind of a thing. It's just like my views, because I've been in hospice for a minute, have changed, and it's more like I try and notice the little things and tell people that how I truly feel about them in the moment, instead of like, oh, I'll tell them later. I've softened at the same time as I've hardened to the world. I've also softened significantly with how I engage with people. I used to be a bit more hardcore with my atheistic views. And then when I started in hospice, I either had to change and adapt or always be angry that my patients still believed in God or that they wanted to pray. I genuinely think if it brings you comfort and you're not hurting me, you're not hurting the people around you, you're not proselytizing or doing any of that stuff, I'm not going to say, hey, well, that's bullshit. That's bringing them comfort. It's bringing them hope. And a lot of times hope is what keeps people living longer. So me trying to change my worldview and see things in a more positive light is actually very difficult for me. And it's something that I try to actively work on. And it's hard because if you don't naturally think in those ways, it's like kind of, I hit a brick wall sometimes. I'm like, no, everything's stupid. Like, everything's the worst. And we're all human. We all have those moments too. But a lot of my patients that are the most positive beacons of light, it's like, man, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to go see Mrs. Smith. Like, that's the kind of person you want to be. I truly think that that's kind of changed my attitudes. I don't know how many people I've seen die. It's astronomical. If I include everyone that's since I've been working in healthcare since I was 20. It's thousands. I mean, I don't know. I can't keep track. So yeah, I just think it's changed my world views, but also my views on death. I know that, death sucks. Death is the worst. Death is bad. I'm not saying that death is great. Everyone should die and all this stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I've seen good deaths where people are content. This generation that is dying is ones that have lived through world wars, moon landing, threat of nuclear annihilation, all of these crazy life-changing events that we read about in history books and we reference, hopefully. There's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but it was like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. I hope that with the dying process, we see more people that they can look back and say, okay, I did have a good life for however long I had. Hopefully it's a long life, and the longevity, it's the quality of your life over the quantity of it. But I would love people to live to be 500 years old. But cryonics in general, I used to be much more of an ardent supporter of it. Mm-hmm. And now I am kind of more of like a Big Lebowski Zen dude about it.
Is it just because you're more comfortable with dying?
I think it has a lot to do with I'm a lot more comfortable with dying. I very much feel I'm desensitized to dying. I just kind of feel like it is quite literally a natural thing that happens. The body knows how to do it because I've seen it so many times. Even if the end is kind of, they're actively fighting it. And I've seen people literally on their last hours say, I'm not dying. This isn't me. This isn't happening. Well, you do. If cryonics can somehow give people that sense of comfort and that sense of hope, I'm all for it. It doesn't necessarily imbue me with a sense of hope or comfort, and that's why I think I've kind of pivoted a little bit. I will continue to be a member. I will continue, because wouldn't it be really cool if it worked? And that'd be sweet. But realistically, from my point of view, from my work experiences, I'm just not 100% sold on it like I was 5 years ago.
When you say you were 100% sold on it 5 years ago, what does that mean?
I think I was younger and literally more naive. I had this vision in my brain that the world would be some utopia and I'd live with Steven and our friends that are signed up for Cryonics forever. Then the more digging I did, it's not that.
So your estimate was just literally much higher back 5 years ago.
I think it was. I mean, I didn't put like a number on it. But I was just like, sure, this will be great. Why not? It's quite literally my attitude towards a lot of things in life is why not? Why not sign up for it on the off chance this might work? I hope it's good. I hope that this is a good thing that I've invested money and time and effort into. It's a gamble. I'm not a gambler. Death is final, and I know it will work. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
At the beginning, when you said 0.5% optimism that it'll work, were you saying that to be polite and you actually think it's less?
It's a joke with social workers. We're not necessarily great with math. But I did pass statistics. Like
a 1 in 200 chance.
No. I am very much a see it, believe it kind of gal. I love the science. I love that the science is there, and I love that people are working on this stuff and they need to continue and have the funding, and it's positive for sure. But I think the probability of it happening, the longer I even talk about it on this podcast, it's less than 0.5%. I simply don't see it working.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that because of like the societal collapse factors, or because of the logistics of getting somebody from their dead to the vat in Michigan?
I think it's both. It's all of the above. It's all the things that I've been talking about. There are too many things in my job that require outside things, outside agencies, human beings that are outside of my control. And that's for basic stuff, like getting someone to a mortuary. Blizzards happen, car accidents happen, things pop up. I had a death last month. They lost our phone call saying that the person had died. And so I'd been waiting at this death for like 4 hours. And I kept calling and I kept calling. Well, their shift had changed. Yeah. And they're like, oh, that's, sorry. Yeah, our bad. Whoops. We'll get right out there. It still took 45 minutes. That was my entire day, essentially. And so there are too many things at play here that I feel like, unless I am literally dying outside on the doorstep of the Cryonics Institute, I'm like, how the hell is this going to work? Literally.
All these deaths sound like deaths where the people don't particularly care that the body be preserved forever. Like, how much of this is ameliorated by if there's literally a team of surgeons with cryoprotectant ready next to you as you're about to die?
Yeah.
Because that is kind of what we're all really shooting for.
That's fair.
I think your brain transplant patient is the closest to that's why I mentioned that one, because given how hard even that was to do, and there was urgency. They wanted the brain well preserved.
And he didn't even have a team that he paid $80,000 to be there when he died.
And also during the pandemic, we had a lot of people that wanted to donate their bodies, and the morgues were full. So this is a bit of a digression, but you can plan for shit, and then a pandemic can happen. I do not think that this is our last pandemic. And so it's like, well, Mom signed up in 1974. And it's like, we have to pivot. Yeah. I'm sorry. There's literally nowhere else for her to go. And so we're going to send her and she'll be cremated. Sorry. Donating your body to science is vague on purpose. You can be launched out of a car and call it science. Yeah. That kind of thing.
I guess what I'm saying is that it's not like people with a vague wish to donate their bodies to science. It's people who have paid $80,000 to have someone standing next to them.
Yeah. So I think in that case, then the probability of it working would be like a lot higher, right? Because then it's like, in an ideal scenario, hospice would be aware and notified of all of your wishes, or the local hospitals, which is something that they encourage you to do here. I haven't done that yet. It's like, hey, if I accidentally die, send me here, because they would know what to do. Yeah. Right.
I wanted to ask about that, not to cut you off, but because I mentioned at the beginning and you chuckled, and I knew you would, because I had the same thought. So, like, if I were to call, I guess, Anschutz is pretty close, the hospital, and say, hey, my name's Steven Zuber. If I die, is there even anyone to take that call, and would they write anything down? Like, as my understanding on the inside, from the window I have to the inside of how this works through you, is that there just really isn't that kind of an organization back there. They're not going to make a chart and have me earmarked, hey, should Steven Zuber ever show up, there's a big flag next to his name, or is there?
You've asked me that question before, and I promised that I would do some research into it, and I've never had cause to do so, because we have not called hospitals being like, hey, we want to do this thing that literally no one else seems to be doing, and like, we're not already associated with those hospitals. Right. Like, I try and keep all of my doctors and my specialists within the same umbrella so they can look at the same notes. I'm sure if I mentioned it at my next PCP appointment, which is coming up, then maybe it would go somewhere in a chart.
I should do that.
And so the catch with that is there are so many different umbrella organizations that if we are sent to a hospital that is not under that organization, they're not going to see any of that stuff. And so that's why it's like you physically call. I don't even know, to be honest with you. Like, I don't have the knowledge if that would go anywhere. It would be literally a triage person on the other end of the line being like, so what do you want me to do with this? Seriously. Right.
Yeah.
Like, what?
That's sort of what I imagined.
Yeah.
I suppose there's probably some people who make like religious preparations with the hospitals in their area, because they're like, under no circumstances do I want someone to give me a blood donation or whatever, right?
Sure.
And so you would call them and probably set that up before you had cause to go to the hospital. You might know a little bit about this, because Jehovah's Witnesses aren't supposed to.
They generally have to refuse at the point of the doctor trying to do it. Like Rachel said, you can't really call a hospital and have that on your record. Like, if this person's ever admitted, don't give them blood. I mean, you can try, but almost always either you or if you're unconscious, someone who loves you has to be standing there saying, no, get this blood away from here.
Yeah.
And that's why you have advanced directives. That kind of was my little moment. It's like, so when we put in our medical durable power of attorney paperwork, there's a little chunk, at least in Colorado, it's like additional instructions. And I wrote on my MPOA that I am a cryonics. I don't remember my exact wording or phrasing, but I did put that on there. So my other thing is, to the average layperson, they're not really going to know what the hell that means. They're so overwhelmed with everything else going on, and they've got 60 other patients that they might have on the docket. So to truly like help write it down and be very specific with phone numbers and stuff like that.
Yeah. If I die, call Suspended Animation Inc. and put my head on ice.
Yeah.
If I were to die suddenly, I'm recording a podcast and I have an aneurysm. Despite the fact that you guys are right here, I really put my chances much closer to like what you were thinking of in terms of preservation. It's just that since I heard the vast majority of deaths are people know they're going to be dying sometime soon, I don't think you can really compare it to an average death. You have to compare it to the death of someone paying $80,000 for professionals to be next to them while they're dying. And I think that makes a huge difference in what's going to happen.
Definitely. And again, too, my POV is skewed because people have signed up for my service. They've signed up for hospice. Medicare is footing the bill, or Medicaid is helping foot this bill. Some people pay privately, but I digress a little bit. But so it's like I am seeing people because it is planned, essentially. A medical doctor said, you have 6 months or less to live. You have a terminal diagnosis. You're not bouncing back. It is... From my point of view, it's a bit more cynical because I see it and it's just like, this is the end product. We mentioned that at the beginning too. It's just like, I know how this is going to end. Yeah. Whatever amount of time I have with this human being depends on their disease progression. And then other times people, yes, they're on our services and then they quote, suddenly die. They throw a clot. They have a heart attack. They have a brain aneurysm. They fall down a flight of stairs. Thankfully, that hasn't happened in a hot second. To my patients, please don't do that. Makes my life really hard. Just kidding. And then
so inconsiderate to die
so
suddenly.
It's so shitty of them to do that.
Well, I think the like the embolism or whatever, like those are one thing, but to fall down the stairs, it's like, all right, now we've got to do like an investigation to make sure you weren't pushed. Is that what you're saying? Please don't do, or don't do any of those.
I mean, don't do any of those. But I mean, yeah, then in that case, the coroner would have to come out and do a whole thing.
Really? How could you possibly tell if someone had been pushed as opposed to slipping?
That's the point. That's why you'd have to have...
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
I showed up one time and police had already been called because the family freaked out and they called 911 because he was found in an odd position on the ground. He died and he was found, and that's all it was. But so my nurse and myself had to talk to the police officers and say like, no, he was already on hospice. He was on hospice for about 12 hours. But this man had a terminal diagnosis. He was not murdered. He, nothing. Yeah. His family member didn't push him down a flight of stairs, that kind of thing.
So if I had an aneurysm right now, Enosh carries me up to the bathtub, fills it with cold water. You carry the ice and all the frozen stuff from the freezer and dump it in. Is any of that legal before, and then somebody calls the, paramedics and suspended animation in the meantime?
First of all, fuck what's legal. I'm doing it anyway.
I appreciate that.
What are they going to do? Put me in jail for putting a dead body in a tub of ice?
I guess I wonder if, say, whoever shows up, I guess I'm not sure who to call in that situation directly. You'd want to call some medical person in Colorado at some point probably, but suspended animation would probably tell you who to call actually next. I was speculating just about how much someone's allowed to do to a dead body of somebody in their house, of a loved one or whatever, not just some random dead person. Again, allowed to before, because if it's too mysterious, then the coroner can't give up your body until they can ascertain whether or not you were murdered or something like that, right? And by that point, they have to do an autopsy, which means you're warm and dead. And so I guess I'm curious, what, if you have any intuitions, I doubt this has ever come up, so maybe this is too off the cuff, but any intuitions of what someone could do in an emergency situation like that would be enough to keep the person from being warm and dead, but not enough to make the police have to do a proper investigation that involves the person being totally dead.
So because of the paperwork that we already have, the cards that we have in our wallets, in theory, I was just looking at those and specifically says, do not do an autopsy. Keep me cool. I am a full body donation. that kind of a thing. In that case, I mean, we might be interviewed and be like, hey, why'd you do that? Meanwhile, I'd be like, my husband's dead, you son of a bitch. I have stuff to do. I have to fly to fucking Michigan. But I think because we have these things in place, we can pull up our documentation. It's in a safe. And it's like, and I have things in like triplicate and all that stuff because that's just how I am. I've seen so many times things go wrong because you didn't cover your butt. And it's just like, CYA, man. It's like, no, I have the receipts. I have the proof. Stephen wanted me to do this. It's not me having a mental break because my husband died.
I know this looks crazy,
looks crazy.
With him in the tub full of ice packs and frozen peas, but
we don't have enough ice either. Dang, we need to prep more. No,
well, that's what I'm saying. We've got some cold packs and, again, stuff in the freezer that we could just throw in the tub. So,
Right. So, no, I mean...
But
cartons of ice cream.
The tub's also
like
not big enough to
space.
keep all of me in there, so it'd have to be like legs up against the wall and then just like head submerged. And it's like, okay, yes. Ignore how this looks.
This looks like the weirdest Dateline ever. I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's a weird question. That's fair.
I am getting a lot more of really make sure to get some medically assisted dying set up because the team of professionals I keep talking about you only got them for 24 hours. So if you don't die in that window, bad news.
Fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
I'm glad that we have the ability to kill ourselves when we need to.
I would like to think that if suspended animation was sitting there and it's 23 hours and 55 minutes and I'm clearly about to die, they might stick around another 10 minutes.
Yeah, right.
But they can't spend the half a week with you because they got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
Well, that just made me feel like this isn't gonna work even more.
Well, because you're right. You've had some patients where it's like, oh, they're dying, and we know it's probably gonna be this weekend, but then maybe not. But it's not like you get
people rally,
right? Yeah. And I think you get some. I'm not sure what the number is. You probably get some number of false alarms with suspended animation before they just say, all right, we're not coming out to you again, right?
No, you get the one shot, and then if you didn't die, then you got to pay $80,000 again.
Oh, fuck that!
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of
Sorry,
money,
guys.
That also doesn't seem fair because half that money goes towards all the shit they're doing and flying me back out to Michigan. If they don't have to do that part, why am I paying the whole price?
I think this is why most people wait until the body is actually declared dead and then call them. And, that's why they're on call and they fly out to anywhere within a few hours. And you're supposed to pack the head and get dry ice and all that. But I would prefer for them to already be right there at my side when I'm about to die. And that's why I want the cocktail. So I can time it to exactly when I want it. Like, I want to maximize my chances. Yeah. I don't want to have to be like, okay, finally, we announced, we timed his death. Like, I may have been dead for 20 minutes already before they finally say, yeah, okay, Inuyasha is dead. And then they have to fly out, and that's going to be a few hours at least. And I don't want that extra time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's So
it's better than nothing.
Yeah, it is.
It's better than rotting in the ground.
And that's
your
kind
brain
of
doesn't start to completely rot immediately, right? It's a process. But I'd like as few brain cells as possible to rot away. In that interim time.
I have so few to spare already.
Right. And a few hours might cost me a few percent.
So again, that's where I fall back as far as like whatever the viability of cryonics as an investment is. It's like you said, it's tens of dollars a month. Mm-hmm. I'm paid for life, and so are you for like our cryonics membership. Mm-hmm. It's just our health insurance policies. If I die in some cool, action movie explosion, then that money goes to Rachel instead of to CI.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have mine set to go to CI no matter what, because even if my body's completely unsalvageable, I want them to have the money for research or whatever.
That's nice of you. And I think you also mentioned at one point that you don't want anyone to have the incentive to kill you.
In a way that my body can't be salvaged, yes.
Right. Which is, that's very on brand. I mean, I have supplementary life insurance that you would also get. So, you don't want to, don't worry about the money from the CI. If you're going to kill me, let them take that change and you can have the rest.
I do know a number of people who are of the opinion that there's not that much damage due to things decaying in the first couple hours.
Yeah.
I would just prefer to not even have those couple hours.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a Less Wrong post from 2011, so clearly it needs to be updated, and this is old data. But success rate was like 1 in 567 for cryonics working at all. And then the Cryonics Institute said that 80% having photomicrographs and positive documentation with this emerging science, 80% are having what is considered a good death, meaning perfusion of the brain.
Okay.
So they have good reason to think that we could warm up a body after cryopreservation with time and science.
Cool.
So that's good.
Yeah.
What was that 1 in 500 and change number
567, the success rate.
of somebody who signed up getting preserved?
Odds of success with the combined probability of failure, meaning something goes wrong in the reviving, it's too expensive, no one's interested.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So
This
making
was-
it all the way to the future and back.
Something goes wrong keeping you frozen, which is stuff I was concerned about.
Okay, this is the end of their Bayesian calculation. This wasn't. I initially heard that as people signed up for cryonics, 1 out of 567 of them get preserved. That's what I thought.
yeah.
That's what I thought you were saying.
Yeah.
Did you have any bits of stuff that we didn't cover? Because I know you mentioned the books that you read and some of the stuff. Was there anything particularly surprising that jumped out from the one from what was it? Death from
All the Living and the Dead?
That's the one. Because she's the one who toured the Cryonics Institute in the last chapter.
Yeah, see, I was going to reread it before this podcast, and this last week of work has been hell, so I did not get around to doing that before this podcast. It was interesting because she's British, and so she's coming at it from a culture different than my own. But at the same time, she does a very good job of explaining the process, how clinical the process is. And I think that's one of the things that, from my perspective, when somebody is dying and families, either if they have good intentions or not, and I see a human being with a lot of tubes coming out of them from all the orifices, or they have made holes in places that there aren't normally holes, and they are trying their damnedest to keep somebody alive. Cryonics uses some of the same, and it says it on their website. I'm not trying to disparage in any way, but that is one way to keep a human body alive, right? And so they're trying to keep you alive even after you have died for as long as possible so they can get you to the institute. And that's fair because that is science and that's how things work.
They're trying to keep you from decaying.
You're correct. Yeah, so scratch that.
Well, because they pump you full of not antifreeze, but
Cryoprotectant. It's like an antifreeze.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It cryoprotectant that is probably more toxic than antifreeze, which is already toxic enough to totally kill you.
Yeah.
And so
The vitrification is what they're talking about, and I had some quotes on that. But the book just kind of made me really, it put it into a very sharp perspective of what my death would actually look like, because I see what it looks like from a living person, watching a person die and seeing us, not pull the plug. Like, we are not in the hospitals being like, okay, take them off the ventilator. Okay, take out all of these tubes, all of these things. And so I don't see any of that. I've seen it in the past, and it is, I love Western medicine by and large because we're pretty darn good at some things, but it is, the best way I can describe it is pretty barbaric.
Yeah.
Taking someone off of a breathing apparatus, especially during COVID. I was posting diagrams of what it actually looks like how far they have to put that down to make your lungs actually work. And I have enough icky feelings around my own body and people probing it or doing that kind of thing that is extremely difficult for me to rationalize. Like, the end result will be worth it. Basically, the damage I feel that is being done to my natural tissues and things. That's why I'm also...
Have you met Alex Hedke?
no, not yet. He's been in town a couple times.
Okay.
The name's familiar.
Yeah.
He's a friend of ours. He's one of the co-founders of the Guild of the Rose.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, he's awesome. And he's been on the show a few times. But he, during COVID, got a real bad case and was in the hospital.
Woof.
I think he was on a ventilator.
I don't know if he was ventilated or not.
Not ventilated. Okay, but he was in the hospital for a number
for
of
days. Yeah.
Oh,
and
man.
I mean, he was a 20-something-year-old fit as fuck vegan.
Right.
Oh,
and
you
that's-
mentioned him.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where, like, he's living a great life. He's an
That's
amazing
great.
person. And I'm like, that was absolutely worth getting intubated
it's worth being
for.
intubated. And I hear you. Some of it could just be my own hang-ups for sure, but especially when I see someone in their 80s and we're intubating and we're doing all the things.
Yeah, at
for
that point,
what?
yeah, to
what
give
is
them a
the end
few
result?
extra weeks of a kind of crappy existence anyway.
That's why CPR is extremely brutal.
Oh, yeah.
And I hate how it's depicted in media because I've seen it.
And they never show that you have to crack the ribs if
No,
you're doing it right.
yeah, and you hear the cracking. It's like, oh, that's the solar plexus. And their ribs might puncture their lung. And then what do you do then? Ooh. And then all this stuff. And like, I could go on and on and on.
Oh, No, I'm with you. A friend of mine, an older friend, his mother-in-law died very slowly over the course of a year. I think it's barbaric keeping people alive just to keep them alive.
Yeah.
Because their quality of life is so awful anyway. In the last 6 months, she basically didn't know where she was. Half the time that she was awake, she was like terrified. Where am I? Who are these people? Like, why are you spending tens of thousands of dollars a month to keep someone alive like that when you know they're just going to die pretty soon anyway, and the time in between is awful? Like,
and the person
real.
that you're trying to keep alive is dead.
Yeah.
You know, you're just keeping their old meat suit ticking.
Just
Robin Henson would say we're doing it to show people that we care and we're nice people.
Yes.
But
end of life care is really fucked.
Yeah.
Care in quotes.
That's why I love hospice, because we don't do that stuff.
Well, you're helping people, you know, at the stage where, I don't think we mentioned, so because you mentioned people can graduate from hospice because they get too healthy. Mm-hmm. You have to have a diagnosis of, like, you have about 3 months to live, right? Or is it 6?
It's 6.
And so you can live longer than that while you're in hospice. Like, you've had patients for years, but they're always supposed to be, like, about to be they're almost dying, and that just keeps going on, basically. So if they're at whatever month 18 of having been on hospice, you've got to justify that again to Medicare because they're paying for it, right?
Yeah. So the Medicare rules, you get 2 90-day certification periods or cert periods. Typically, I don't even know statistically how many people die within the first 90 days, the 180 days. But you get 90, and then 60-day cert periods after that. We look every 2 weeks to see if somebody's declining. We have these massive meetings with our medical director and everything. And to like say that out loud, it sounds kind of strange, but we're trying to keep them on hospice because we want them to get help that they might need to be comfortable. And so we're trying to keep them on as long as possible.
I am of the opinion, and this was after seeing my friend's mother-in-law dying like this, that she was no longer mentally competent to make decisions for herself. Like, she literally could not request aid in dying.
Yeah.
Even if she had wanted to, and she was highly Catholic, so probably she wouldn't have wanted it anyway. Maybe once you get to be that miserable, you're like, no, fuck it. Just God will forgive me. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. But she couldn't do that. She wasn't mentally competent to do that. I am of the opinion that, and I know this could be abused, but that if someone is verifiably in really bad shape and can't make that decision for themselves, that someone who loves them should be able to make that decision. The same way if your pet is suffering, you're allowed to put the pet down. And I mean, I know it sounds kind of heartless and cruel. No, it doesn't sound heartless. I think the most heartful thing you could do, is to go in and say, I need to put my mother down. This is the best thing for her. But right now, that would be considered murder.
Correct.
That sucks. Do you think we should push more for a close loved one can decide to end the life of an elderly suffering relative?
In my personal opinion, I think that is also a compassionate thing to do. There is something that some of my patients do that if they do not qualify for medical aid in dying, they voluntarily stop eating and drinking. It's called VSED. That takes a long time and it's arduous. It takes longer because you need to be healthy enough to ingest MAID and do all of the things. And so in theory, you're not actually super close to your own death. Mm-hmm. You're close enough. Mm-hmm. You qualify. I had a patient, and this is getting close to like Guinness Book World Records levels. It took her 13 days to die because she would not drink water. She would not drink any liquid. She would not eat any kind of food. And she slowly starved to death. That's inhumane. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they let her take a maid cocktail?
This was prior to COVID and things were not virtual. So it used to be you had to leave your own home, and she was homebound.
Oh.
And she was 90. Used to be like your family member couldn't really take it. It was a very complicated, convoluted process. It did not need to be that way. And thankfully, actually, things were just signed last month or earlier this month, making the wait time significantly shorter for medical aid in dying, which is fantastic. And they make special exceptions now if you're about to die very quickly. It's literally within like a couple days or 24 hours. I can't quite remember. I should know this because I went to a talk on it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you took
We've been
notes.
talking
That's
about
why people take notes.
Right. But yeah, I mean, in that case, it was so traumatic for the daughter watching her mom die. And there was nothing for us to do because at the same time, giving her liquid morphine or liquid Ativan or that kind of thing, she said no. She's like, that's going to extend my life.
Would it extend her life?
I mean, in a sense, probably.
Tell me about all the murderers that that you said you run into, because you said, I mean, we glossed over this and said we'll get back to it if we have enough time, and we didn't have enough time, but like you said, a lot of people confess murder to you on their deathbed?
Well, I wouldn't say a lot because, like, what is a lot, right? I mean,
it sounds like half the people you run into have murdered someone.
It's not half. I'd say like a good. Well, it depends on where I worked, right? And so,
To hear Rachel talk about murderous old people for a good 10 minutes or so, subscribe on Patreon or on Substack to get our bonus content. You'll also get access to all the archived bonus content stretching back years. Final thoughts?
Thank you for letting me come on and talk about my work, and hopefully it wasn't terribly tangential, and talk about cryonics a little bit and get a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Dying to figure out if it works or not.
Yeah.
So, still gonna stay signed up?
I will. Yeah, I have nothing to lose.
That's what I think about it too. You know, at the very least, I have nothing to lose and a lot to gain. And if you do what nerds call like utility calculation, the lost income or lost money I get from paying a insurance premium versus the potential payoff of infinite utils of living forever, well, then the math it makes it inescapably the right choice. But
assuming that your probabilities are decently high.
Well, I mean, even if you say, you know, that the end result possible utils are approaching infinity, then the rest of my numbers can be, you know, infinitesimal.
Well, but that's the Pascal's mugging, and that's why once the percentage gets low enough, I round it off to 0 and like, no, you can't mug me.
Fair enough.
So, so if my percentage was low enough, I would just stop paying.
I think if anything, it would give me pause to and I know we're just wrapping up, but I was like, I'm going to stay signed up, but I am also going to have a backup plan of if this isn't going to work.
I just got an image of the guy from The Mummy with all the different religious symbols, the Star David and the crucifix.
I love it so much. Yeah. I do. But it's just like, yeah, if this isn't going to work and like I'm run over by a car or something like that, it's like, please, like water cremate me, do something like that. I don't want to be buried in the ground.
Yeah, I'll have a plan
unless
B
it's
too.
Like completely natural or that kind of thing. It's like, I think write everything down is like the takeaway. Like write down your wishes, write down what you want to actually have happen in detail. The more you put in, then the easier it will actually be.
And not on a post-it note on your fridge. You want it on like your state's official whatever MP medical durable power of attorney paperwork and
MPOA,
stuff like that.
MDPOA.
And honestly, as long as you're doing that, just write down somewhere, even unofficially, what you want to happen with your stuff if you have any assets.
Yeah, living
because
wills.
then your loved ones don't have to go to court and fight over shit.
Right.
Or, I mean, they might still, but it'll go
Not
a lot
as
faster.
much.
Yeah, and be a lot cheaper if it just says, look, he said right here, he wants his house to go to his brother.
There you
Before I fly and stuff, like we went out to Vibe Camp, I texted my brother and I said, hey, if I die, or if we both die and, you know, the plane explodes, all the stuff in the house is yours.
Cool.
And I don't know who the house would fall to, but if this counts for anything, the house is yours then too.
Okay.
There you go.
I don't know if that's legally binding, but
Again, it would help in court.
it would help.
Yeah.
Totes.
And, I mean, all the stuff in the house is peanuts compared to the house itself.
Totally.
That's what you want to be on the record.
Right. But
Stephen, has your percentage gone down or changed?
it was enough of a range where I'm still about right there.
Yeah.
I think, again, the key for this to working is having some prep involved.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like a hospice patient is actually a perfect candidate for that.
Yeah.
Like, the downside, though, is, like you said, if they're only going to sit at your bedside for 24 hours, you've had patients that they've been dying all weekend. You know, like they started dying on Thursday night, and then they don't actually
Die till Monday.
Right. Yeah. And so, when do you call suspended animation? It's hard to say.
If you're not offing yourself, you have a loved one nearby, and they call as soon as you die.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I would off myself, so I know exactly what time I'm going to die, and have them there for that.
I guess, I you know, time aside, there's a couple caveats there though. Like, you can't just go to your doctor and say, I want this cocktail. And if you were to like just straight up kill yourself, then I think the state won't let them release your body until they can confirm that, because suicides are mucky water. So you need a medically you need a medically signed off suicide, and you can't just ask for that. Even like if you're 90 but otherwise healthy, you can't just have that in the house without.
You need a terminal diagnosis. You would need to actually physically move somewhere else, like Canada, and we'd figure that out.
I mean, we need better laws. First of all, maybe moving to Canada. Yeah, and I do think some suicide, like if it was really well documented, you said, I'm about to do this, you have the paperwork, you take video of yourself doing it, probably they wouldn't like force in an autopsy.
Well, we'll figure out some more of the logistics on that.
Because I remember reading once that like all suicides have to be autopsied by law, and apparently that's not true. That's just not the case.
That's good. I mean, I suppose it I could speculate, but I'd just be speculating. But thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
You're
and
welcome.
You had a lot of cool insights to share, and I love hearing about you talk about your work, and it's heavy business. I don't know how many people listening would be squeamish about some of it, but that's the point. Is like this is important work, and I'm so glad that people like you can do it. So
thank
there
you.
There aren't a lot of people like you. So
quite literally, yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, want to call it?
Let's call it. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks. You.
Bye. Steven, welcome back.
Hey, Inyash, how's it going?
Pretty good. I had a great night last night, and I'm feeling pretty decent.
Nice. I'm tired, but it's Monday, and I've got a 4-day weekend coming up, so I can manage for a couple more days.
Right. I am also tired. That was part of the great night last night thing. But,
yes. That's the price we pay to enjoy ourselves after dark.
Exactly. But I got caffeine plus modafinil, which I know you probably shouldn't mix, but, it's a morning.
Are you not supposed to? I'll be honest, I mix caffeine, Adderall, and modafinil every workday.
Oh shit. Okay. I don't know. I think it's better if you don't. I do sometimes mix caffeine and modafinil. I have found that I am just a better human being and significantly happier when I am on stimulants of some kind. But I don't want to burn through all the stimulants and get tolerances to all of them and load up on everything. So I've heard of a guy, I don't know him personally, who will go for several days on modafinil, then several days on caffeine, then several days on Adderall, and just keep cycling them like that so he doesn't get a tolerance to any of them. And I want to do that, but it's been difficult. Like, caffeine is just... It's better than modafinil as far as I can tell in terms of me being happy, and it's hard to shake the caffeine habit.
I think it's the kind of thing that if used routinely, like even routine being 3 or 4 straight days, you kind of just need to stop feeling shitty. And
yeah.
My version of that practice is I just don't take modafinil and Adderall on the weekends, and I usually have less caffeine. But yeah, if anyone has a great wealth of knowledge there, hit me up. I'm curious.
Yeah, because right now I just feel like I just have to go a few days where I feel crappy without caffeine, and I don't like it. I should be getting an Adderall prescription pretty soon, though, so maybe that'll substitute well enough.
Nice. Amphetamines to the rescue.
Hell yes.
So speaking of to the rescue, today's episode is brought to you by the Guild of the Rose. The Guild of the Rose is a vibrant community dedicated to personal growth and self-improvement. With a unique system that blends practical life skills, mental and physical wellness, and rational thinking, the Guild offers weekly workshops and supportive cohorts to help you achieve your full potential. Whether you're looking to enhance your career, boost your creativity, or expand your knowledge, the Guild of the Rose provides these tools and community that you need to succeed. Join the Guild today and start your journey towards a better you at guildoftheRose.org.
That was nicely done. Where's that from?
Yeah, see, it's obvious I can't take credit for that because I was too articulate, right?
Well, I mean, people have a different voice when they're reading than when they're talking.
Maybe I just wrote it down first, but it's not in the show notes.
I absolutely would believe that you wrote it down first because I have faith in you to write this down. It just, the voice was different.
Maybe I'm looking at ChatGPT and it helped me put the nice plug together. Who knows?
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Awesome.
However,
good job, ChatGPT.
I wouldn't have read it if I didn't endorse every syllable of it. So
Exactly. I'm also a huge fan of the Guild of the Rose, and now I'm going to look stupid compared to ChatGPT because I'm not nearly as articulate. That was very well done.
yeah, it's good at sounding smart. Actually, it was kind of fun. I just said, tell me about the Guild of the Rose, and it searched several websites. I said, hey, they sponsor my podcast. Can you summarize their mission in such a way that would make a solid plug for the episode? And that's what it
Nice.
gave me. So
This is the kind of skill that you can learn by attending the Guild of the Rose. They strongly encourage this sort of ways to make your life better.
do you want to outsource your thinking and mental labor? Well, or rather offload it when appropriate. We'll learn when it's appropriate
There we
at
go.
guildoftherose.org.
Yeah. Let's pretend they're all signed up for cryo, and then we can go back and check after this.
Well, let's ask them and see if they have any compelling arguments for or against. But first, we need to figure out if hands and fingers are different things.
Actually, even before that, I wanted to have a piece of feedback on the previous episode that we did.
Oh yes, thank you for reminding me. This looks interesting. I'm excited.
Yeah, so the previous episode that we did with Brandon, he talked about an argument that Bentham's Bulldog made for the existence of God. And it was one of the worst arguments I have read in over a decade. Like, it's ridiculously bad.
What
in my
classic
opinion.
form is it? I'm sure unless it's fully original, I'm sure it's been around in some form.
What's the one called where I can imagine it, therefore it must be true?
Ontological proof.
To me, it feels very much like an ontological proof.
Yeah, that's not interesting.
No.
I mean, the world's greatest sandwich, the most conceivable best sandwich is better than the one that doesn't exist. Therefore, it exists. But where the hell is it? I ask you. It's lunchtime here, and I need to know where this perfect sandwich is.
I want to preface this with how surprised I was by how bad it is. Because this is, I mean, he titles it the best argument for God. Like, whatever. People title stuff like that all the time. But this is a guy who is read by and taken somewhat seriously in other arguments by people I really respect. Like, the top comment on this post is from Scott Alexander, where he's trying to, I don't know if he's trying to argue against it or understand it more or what, but like, Scott Alexander himself takes a lot of this guy's writings seriously enough to read this post, which is nearly 9,000 words. And in the second paragraph of this post, Bentham's Bulldog says, this argument is, by my estimation, overwhelmingly powerful, with overwhelmingly powerful in quotes. I think it, or not in quotes, but in italics. I think it has force like almost nothing else in the God debate. And then says, even if I were pretty sure theism was false prior to considering the argument, after considering it, I'd be pretty sure theism is true. Here I want to convince you to share my judgment that learning about the anthropic argument should dramatically boost, again in italics, your credence in theism. So this guy that people take seriously thinks this is an absolutely stunning argument. I'm going to summarize it for you, and you can tell me if I'm missing something. For this nearly 9,000 word post, he spends, I think, more than half of it trying to convince us that something that is insanely strong evidence for something should be insanely strong evidence for that thing. That basically, if you're a million times more likely to see something if a hypothesis is true, that means that it is very strong evidence for that hypothesis, and you should update by a million times more than you would different pieces of evidence, which, in my opinion, is just obvious, right?
I would asterisk that with depending on the quality of the evidence.
Sure, but if the evidence is actually good.
Right. I mean, the reason I asterisk that is because it was a popular argument back in the day when people would use Bayesian reasoning to argue against theism. They'd say, well, I don't know if this was brought up in earnest, it's a 20-year-old memory, but somebody at some point pointed out, it's like, well, ask 100 random people on the street or 1 million people on the street, if God exists, they'll say yes. That's weak evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, that's shit evidence. No, but like this is actual legit evidence. The thing that he cites is the anthropic argument as evidence, which means he starts. I believe this one. He starts with this basic coin flip argument, and it's good. It's a classic in my opinion. God flips a coin. If the coin comes up heads, he creates one of you in a blank room and you wake up. If the coin comes up tails, he creates 1 million of you in a blank room and you wake up. You have just woken up in a blank room having been created by God, and you know that the coin was just flipped. What are the chances that it came up tails?
Do I get to look around and see if there's 1 million more of me, -1?
You do not. All you know is that you exist.
Well, it sounds like I'm in the second. I have 1,000,000 to 1 odds of being in the second bucket, don't I?
Exactly. This is
Or no, wait,
extremely
scratch
good.
that. I have a 50% chance being in the second bucket.
No, I would say you have 999,999 times chance of being in the second bucket, because it's a million times more likely you exist if the coin came up tails than heads.
But if all I know that there was a coin flip, isn't that the only
Yeah.
requisite variable there?
That's not the only thing you know. You also know that you exist.
I mean, but I would exist in either outcome of the head of the coin flip.
Yes, but your chances of existing are a million times greater if it came up tails.
But they're also 100% if it came up heads.
Okay, fair enough.
I might be missing the thrust of this argument, and I don't want to bog us down to the wrong point. And I'm probably just actually doing probability wrong. But after the fact, I'm like, yeah, okay. If I wake up, there's 1,000,001 of me. One of me is in the alternate universe where there was a heads, and there's 1,000,000 of me in the universe where there's a tails. It sounds like I've about 1,000,000 times better odds being in the second universe, or in the first universe, the one that came out tails.
Yeah, you should expect that there is 1,000,000 of you rather than there is one of you.
Now that I think makes sense. Okay.
Oh, that's the basic argument, that this is extremely strong evidence that the coin flip came up tails, and I agree. And he goes on for half the post making the same point over and over and over again, and I don't know why he wasted so many words on that, because either you're going to buy it or you're not. If you're not buying it, there's better places out there on the internet that make this argument, and he should have just linked to one of those. But then he goes on to say that, okay, that God wants the maximum number of people to exist.
That seems okay. I'll let that sentence slide before I rebut.
No. I'm right with you. Like, first of all, what makes you say that? You need some reason to say that, and he just absolutely asserts it out of the blue. I looked through this post. I could not see any reason why I should think that God wants the maximum number of people to exist. That's just the thing that he said.
Okay, so I could think of like 5 things off the cuff of why I would think that's not the case. 1, the world should be bigger. 2, the universe should be more habitable. 3, some significant double-digit percentage of fertilized eggs result in natural miscarriages, or even just failure to implant on the uterine wall. Natural disasters, and death.
Well, see, all of these things go to the second point that I was about to make. The first point being, even before we get to there, what evidence is there that God wants, first of all, anything at all, but this thing in specific, right?
I don't know, and I just made up, and I think 5 semi-compelling reasons why I think that I like counter argument to that point.
Yeah, well, okay, so his first argument, and he actually says this, that God wants the maximum number of people to exist, which I wish he had said why he says that. But then he does not say this anywhere, but it is heavily implied that he also believes that currently the maximum number of people exist. Or maybe I'm reading it wrong and he thinks it's just possible in our universe for the maximum number of people to exist. But either way, both of those assertions are fucking ridiculous for the reasons you just pointed out, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where to get started. So
exactly my point.
I don't want to spend the whole time on this aside, but I mean, God could have started by making more than 2 people, or I guess more than 1 actually, depending on which version you believe. But I mean, also we're not nearly at population. We're not nearly at the population cap for the world. The world could be bigger. You know what I mean? Like even though the world itself is mostly uninhabitable because most of it's water. And salt water, nonetheless, that we can't drink. Like this is insanity.
This is fractally wrong, as Eliezer would say.
I like
on
that.
Every level that you try to examine it, it's just as wrong as it was on every previous level. So yeah, he puts all this importance on how big a deal it is that the anthropic argument, the coin flip argument, is correct. Which again, I'm with him on. I guess not everybody is. But then these 2 crazy ass assertions out of the blue, which are completely unrelated and completely unsupported, and somehow those 2 unsupported asserted things plus the anthropic argument is overwhelmingly powerful evidence that should make someone who was pretty sure theism was false now think they're pretty sure it's true. Like, my mind was blown, not because the argument is so bad. I've seen even worse arguments than this, but that someone who is currently respected in many other areas of thinking thinks that this is such a good argument. And I don't know if I'm missing something here.
Maybe.
Like I've talked to a couple other people and they also didn't get it, but maybe we are all just collectively not smart enough to get it.
Well, the more people we run into that don't get it is at least weak evidence that this is a bad argument. So Share it in the show notes, and I'll read it just for the sheer joy, and I'll see if I can actually pick up what they're putting down in a way that wasn't summarized, because I don't find this the least bit compelling. I thought it'd be some cool new original argument, and
no.
Well,
okay, all right, Stephen. We're back. You had a thing you wanted to say about Bentham, and then I wanted to make a clarification, or not Bentham, but the Bentham's Bulldog God argument thing.
Yeah.
What is up?
Well, so I checked out his blog, and for posterity, it's on Substack. It's Bentham's Bulldog, just like it sounds. His most recent post one day goes, "Why don't Christians make this sort of argument more?" And it's a 30-second read, but I won't read the whole thing. He points to a couple of things like they make all sorts of unconvincing arguments, like from fulfilled prophecy. They don't use the powerful arguments for their position from, for example, modern miracles.
Whoa, what?
A picture of Mary appears atop a church in Egypt and seems to defy natural explanation, seen by tens of thousands of people. Well, then he mentions Christians standardly ignore the healing at Kalanda, where a person regrew a limb after praying to Mary, as attested to by a thorough investigation by secular authorities, with lots of eyewitnesses attesting to each of the following. The amputation, the leg, yada yada. So I mentioned the healing at Kalanda because that rang a bell, and this is one of the benefits of listening to Skeptoid for the last 15-odd years. In 2011, there was an episode on the miracle of Kalanda. I didn't actually take the time to re-listen to it, but let me skim. It looks like it. I'm sure it didn't happen.
Okay,
like he didn't regrow a leg. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So if you're curious, check out, I'll link to it, but episode 247 of Skeptoid. If anyone here hasn't listened to Skeptoid, check it out.
How long ago did this episode come out?
March 1st, 2011.
So more than 13 years ago, Skeptoid showed how this was just a load of crap, and yet Bentham's Bulldog is still citing it as an actual real miracle that actually happened.
Right.
Okay.
So even back then, like Ryan Dunning started off like a little more, like in the first few dozen episodes, a bit more bullish, one might say. But he's parsimonious and nice. He's like, I'm not accusing the main witness, Miguel Juan Pelicaro, of being a fraud, but I am pointing out there's a far more probable alternate explanation. Faking blindness, for example, is hardly unheard of among beggars.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently there's no evidence that his leg was ever amputated, or that is ever treated at all.
Oh my god! It's just a dude with two legs, and he says one of them got regrown after an amputation.
Yeah, I'm assuming that he was sitting down as a beggar and was hiding part of his leg or something. And so, and he ends with a very polite way of saying, we can't say for sure that the miracle of Kalanda is not genuine, and we can't prove that Miguel Juan Pelizaro's leg was not miraculously restored. But we can say that the evidence that we have falls short and is perfectly consistent with no miracle having taken place.
Awesome.
I always love that kind of phrasing, because it was like when James Randi, whenever he would go on TV and mimic one of, Uri Geller, was that the guy?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I'm not saying that that's how he's bending spoons, but that's how I would do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, just a nice way of saying, I'm not saying it's bullshit, but if he was bullshitting you, do what I just did.
Oh. Well, thank you for that update.
Yeah.
That is great.
I'm eager to hear what else Bentham's Bulldog has to knock me down with, because if he's citing these as, compelling things that people should be arguing in favor of the religion, I'm ready to be impressed.
Well, this is not that at all. This is just a minor clarification about the God's coin flip thing, because I think I said it wrong.
Okay.
I believe the thing that I said was God flips a coin, and on heads he makes one of you, and on tails he makes 1,000,000 of you. What is the chance it comes up tails? And you said, I don't know, 50-50.
I think I waffled on that for a bit, but I still kind of feel like, given nothing else, all I know is that I exist in isolation.
Yeah.
It seems like it's the odds of a coin toss, 50%.
I want to clarify what that actual anthropic argument is, and whether it changes how you feel at all.
And that's what we do, even if it's a position that I think neither of us find compelling or take very seriously. We're not going to misrepresent it. So I appreciate you setting the record straight here.
Yeah, well, and also because I do think the anthropic argument provides some decent evidence that the coin did come up tails, even if I don't buy anything else at all. It's not that God makes one of you or 1,000,000 of you. It's that if it comes up heads, God makes a person, and if it comes up tails, God makes 1,000,000 people. All you know is that the coin was flipped and that you exist, and that you are a people, I guess. That probably goes without saying. Put that way, does it change your intuitions at all?
If I still am in a white room with no one else around, I don't think it actually does.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't know who I would be in either case.
Okay.
I might be missing something.
The intuition pump that I heard, which I liked, the same coin flip thing. God flips the coin. It's a fair coin. If it came up heads, he made two people. One is wearing a blue shirt. One is wearing a red shirt. If it comes up tails, he made 1,000,001 people. One is wearing a blue shirt. 1,000,000 are wearing red shirts. You wake up, you look down, you're wearing a red shirt. Do you think that the coin most likely came up heads or most likely came up tails?
So in that case, tails, because I have another piece of evidence to update on, the red shirt.
Okay. How is that different from doing the same thing, but just erasing the one blue-shirted person from each side?
Because then the red shirt provides no evidence at all.
I mean, I think it provides the same amount of evidence in one cases, because in one case, there's a 1 in, just 1 out of 1 chance that you were made. In the other case, there's 1,000,000 of you that were made.
I think a proper Bayesian will be able to set me straight on this, but for some reason, I again, if I wake up I'm just picturing the white room from the Matrix where the architect lives.
Mm-hmm.
If I wake up there and there's no one else around, I have no idea what way. I see it as just the odds of a coin flip. But if I see a red shirt in the second case there, then that's huge evidence in favor of the second case. Well, no, it would just make me think 25% that it came up either way. Well, no. If it's in the first case, 1 red, 1 blue. Second case, 1,000,000 red, 1 blue. The red shirt would still count as evidence in favor of the tails, yeah, just because there's more tails. Or excuse me, more red shirts.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's hard now that I am spelling it out that way. I don't see if I kind of see the thing that I'm missing, but I'm not able to fully wrap my head around it.
Okay. Noodling on that for a while. And I think also reading more arguments along those lines, many, many years ago now, back when Less Wrong was still in its heyday, I think eventually convinced me that it was correct to update on actually it's 1,000,000 times more likely it came up tails due to the fact that I exist is some evidence.
Is this like a Monty Hall problem that I'm failing to grok properly? Because
I don't think so. It's just that 1,000,000 people would exist, and the fact that you personally exist is highly unlikely if there's only one person that was made. But if there was 1,000,000 people that were made, it's not nearly as unlikely that you exist, because there's also 999,000 other people that were also made.
The thing about that is it's me starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
It's also astronomically improbable for me to exist now. The fact that my parents met, that their parents met, going all the way back to when we all looked like shrews,
Right.
And not to mention just the odds of any particular sperm being the one to fertilize the egg. And I've got the fun wrinkle of having an identical twin, which didn't have to happen. So my particular existence is super unlikely, and here I am. I guess Bentham's Bulldog would find that as evidence of, might find that as evidence of God's existence. I just find it as evidence of the law of large numbers. And the fact that when I say I exist, I would be saying that whether or not my parents were my parents or not, right?
Right. I don't need any evidence that you exist or that your parents exist. I would still need evidence that there was a God that flipped a coin that created you, which we are never given at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, have you heard about this picture of, was it St. Mary or something?
Oh, she appeared on top of a church and no one could explain it.
Yeah, the picture of Mary appears atop a church in Egypt. I'll link to this most recent post. Here's the one that I'm talking about. And then also you can check out the Skeptoid post. Again, I don't find this compelling. I find it so uncompelling. I feel bad kind of knocking on it, because I don't feel like this is not the most convincing argument I've ever heard. They're
not sending their best and their brightest.
If you want to put it that way, yeah.
I don't know. This is kind of what I would have expected, considering the best argument for God that ever exists that we talked about earlier. And I don't want to dunk on it too hard, but now who am I kidding? I do, because it's that bad.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's a great thinker in many other regards, but God, these arguments were so bad.
What's the best argument you could think of in favor of God's existence? I guess I should caveat that, because I could think of an important asterisk in the existence of Yahweh versus the existence of a God.
Right. And that was the thing I was going to say, because the fact that something exists rather than nothing is maybe some sort of Bayesian evidence of something, maybe, kinda, but
that's my thing.
Yeah.
The universe's existence is confusing.
Right.
And I can see someone being so strung out about that they invoke a creator, which I can sympathize with. But then to move on to say that creator doesn't like gay sex and masturbation makes it, that leap I can't follow.
I mean, for me, even the leap that it's a creator that has conscious thought and personhood is way too much. Like, I'd be more willing to be like, this is creator is.
You've read enough Lovecraft.
Yeah, exactly. This creator could be a mass of worms twitching in the ineffable darkness of eternity.
Yeah, and this is just a weird thing that happens in their multi-conscious connected dream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was the update.
Seems weak to me.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of seeming weak, you want to pivot to the feedback from Rock Notes on.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought this was fun.
Yes, this was fascinating. You wanna read this? This is about the difference between atheists and agnostics.
Yeah, sure. So 24% of atheists and 61% of agnostics believe, quote, there is something spiritual beyond the natural world, even if we can't see it, unquote.
24% of atheists. So a quarter of atheists, of people who say they're atheists, aren't actually atheists.
Well, I think they might be using the word spiritual the way you're using it, which is part of the reason that I think Wes might have a point in arguing against your use of it.
No, because the question actually says, the question within quotes is, there's something spiritual beyond the natural world. And my spirituality specifically denies there's anything beyond the natural world.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, I mean, I've met in fact, this is the last bullet point, but I've met atheists who, believe in crystals or, that sort of magic and stuff. So
it's nuts.
It is nuts. I guess
you got to keep going down this.
I will
this list just to get how crazy nuts it really is.
But if you tightly box atheism as just like saying I don't think God exists, then there's still room for all sorts of other crazy.
Keep going. Keep
going. 31% of atheists and 60% of agnostics believe, quote, humans have a soul or spirit in addition to their physical body, unquote.
Mm-hmm. That's a thing, but it's not as bad as the next one.
That's a thing I could see you actually agreeing with last week before you saw this.
I, again, have said that the soul is part of your physical body. It is literally inside your brain. It is...
Okay. In addition to their physical body. Yeah, that's... What are they talking about then? Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, well, this one blew my mind.
Yeah.
4% of atheists and 18% of agnostics believe in a heaven.
Heaven! And 3%
believe in hell.
And 3% of atheists believe in hell.
Yeah. First of all, I don't get why those numbers aren't the same.
Right.
And, I mean, unless you just think that so
like not even all Christians believe in hell. Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in hell.
Nice.
But they do believe in heaven. Yeah.
Well, that's nice of them. 9% of atheists and 25% of agnostics believe that, quote, certain objects like crystals, jewels, or stones can have spirits/spiritual energies, unquote.
Yeah, I guess I could kind of see a hippie saying that they're an atheist, even though I'd say that they're wrong. But like literally the 4 and 3% that believe in heaven and hell are just, you're just not an atheist.
Yeah.
You don't know what the word means.
I want to find, I'll find the original post in Discord from this, or that this came from Rock Notes, but I'm curious if they cited the survey and if that survey's methodology is available, because maybe it was just maybe people didn't understand the question. My other guess is that it's the lizard man constant. 3 or 4% of people are just fucking with the survey takers.
Yeah, just trolling for the lulz.
Because the only atheist version of a heaven/hell that I could parse without like an actual god would be the overlords of the Matrix.
Yeah, that after we die, they're like, all right, that was a good run, guys. Here's your actual reward for making it through that and letting us see how things would play out in the Matrix.
Right, which I assign that a non-zero probability. And it's an order of magnitude higher than I assign, at least an order of magnitude higher than I assign, like a bearded guy that looks kind of like God is described. It looks like me or whatever, but with a beard.
Maybe that is what those atheists that they surveyed said, thought then, something similar to that.
It could be. In that case, then I certainly wonder, it would be mean for the simulation makers to make a hell. But yeah. We can argue with the dungeon master later. So
yeah,
but yeah, that's kind of fun.
It certainly updated me a lot in terms of like people meaning the same things that I understand these words to mean. I think Rockonauts, I believe it was Rockonauts, maybe it was a different user in the Discord, commented that the only thing that all atheists seem to have in common across these surveys is that they specifically don't believe in the Christian God of Christianity. And again, that is not how I would use the word atheism, but sure.
Yeah, me either. I get how it popularly means that. Like there are Buddhist atheists. Indeed, there are Jewish atheists, but they don't pretend to believe in an afterlife or whatever. But there is a way to believe in some sort of mind-to-body dualism while saying I don't think God is real.
Yeah.
It surprises me that it's as high as these numbers suggest. But there it is. All right.
All right, should we get into the less wrong posts then?
Sure. First one here, we have hands versus fingers. He opens up nicely. He says, back to our original topic, reductionism, which, in case you've forgotten, is part of a sequence on the mind projection fallacy. There can be emotional problems in accepting reductionism if you think that things have to be fundamental to be fun, but this position commits us to never taking joy in anything more complicated than a quirk, and so I prefer to reject it.
Yes.
As I read that, I try to read things I like uncharitably, and so I could see someone saying, oh, well, he just doesn't like the conclusion, so he's rejecting it. But he's not engaging in wishful thinking there. I think he's describing the observed behavior in both himself and others that, you know, people who properly understand reductionism also have fun.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the idea that that can't be fun rather than that isn't true as a thing that he rejects.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I like this nice one-sentence summary of reductionism that's just a smidge too long to put on a mug or a bumper sticker.
It's really good summary, though.
Yeah. The reductionist thesis is that we use multi-level models for computational reasons, but physical reality has only a single level.
I wish I could memorize that, because I probably can't. It's like Jennifer's definition of rationalism, which now I have forgotten, and I need to go back and listen to that episode again, because it was short and very good, but just long enough to not fit on a bumper sticker, and so it did not stick in my brain.
I think her definition was of rationalist and ratfic, which was similar, people who employed the methods of rationality, more or less.
Yeah, it was definitely more of applying systemizing vibes to the world, I think, something along those lines.
Yeah, it wasn't circular, and it didn't use rationality, I think, in the definition, but yeah. So let's take this multi-level model and take a specific case of the idea that I have a hand, I'm looking at it, well, I have two, fortunately, but I'm looking at my left one, and I notice that after looking for a second, it's composed of a palm, a thumb, and 4 fingers.
Not only that, I think that a recent discovery has been made by scientists, which is quite stunning. He says it's not your hand that holds the cup. It's actually your fingers, thumb, and palm. After scientists measured the forces exerted on the cup by each of your fingers, your thumb, and your palm, they found there was no force left over. So the force exerted by your hand must be 0.
QED. The theme here is that we can see how, not just that, a higher level reduces to a lower one. Once you can see how that's the case, they won't seem like separate things within your map. You'll be able to see how silly it is to think that your fingers could be in one place and your hand could be somewhere else.
Yeah.
And he takes a lot of digs at philosophers here.
It seems the point of this post, and I really like the post for this, is to really point out, really get to anyone who reads it on a deep, intuitive, well, duh level, how silly it is to think that your fingers could be like in one place and then your hands is somewhere else, and that it's silly to argue about whether your hand is picking up the cup or your fingers. Just because your hand reduces to fingers and palm does not mean that your hand doesn't exist. Like it's a conceptual distinction, not a literal two different things distinction.
Yeah, and I like this post not just because it illustrates that well, but this is a good just jumping off point to illustrate what we mean by multi-level models for computational reasons.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we don't talk about our fingers and palm and thumb when that's so many syllables and we could just use the word hand.
Yeah, exactly.
And the hand kind of means the aggregate of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, to dig into more things that these imaginary philosophers would argue about, you know, if I lose my pinky, do I still have a hand? You know, is a hand only something with a palm, thumb, and 4 fingers? What if it's got 3 fingers? It seems like you only need a sufficient amount of meat and tendons there to count as a hand.
But on the other hand, I had someone argue this I get it.
Gotcha.
When he met someone who had lost all his fingers due to frostbite, he was like, at that point, you basically don't have hands, because a hand without any fingers is just kind of a wobbly extension of your arm. And he's right. Like, you need fingers as well to really make a hand a useful hand in any meaningful way.
Yeah, hand is the word that we use for the thing at the end of our arms that we can use to manipulate stuff.
Right.
And, you know, it's often made of a thumb and 4 fingers in the palm, but my uncle has a hook that functions as his right hand. It's not a pirate's hook, unfortunately. It's the kind that he flexes his arm to like expand the rubber bands that pull it shut. So you can pick up basic things with it. I met a guy at a car dealership once who had one that he could pop on that was a full hand with digits that he could move with his mind.
Oh, nice.
And this was like 15 years ago, maybe 10. I'm really curious what this technology is at now.
How did your uncle lose his hand?
If I remember correctly, he was working on a train and the brake slipped.
Oh, Jeez.
And the way that he tells it is that he stayed awake long enough to tell the paramedics, just cut it off. But, who knows how much exaggeration was put in there. But given as told, it was a very badass story.
What would the alternative been to cutting it off?
Trying to fix it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, so the as far as I understand, to get a bit more gruesome, the break didn't slip and neatly cut his arm off. It slipped in such a way that it was creeping up his arm from fingers working up. Yeah. So,
oh shit.
Yeah, he's like, rather than try and sew it all together, just chop it.
Well, so I love this next thing that I pulled out. He says, imagine philosophers suggesting that hands don't really exist. Or philosophers who suggest appendigeal bridging laws to explain how a particular configuration of fingers evokes a hand into existence. And again, this is silly, but I think it is a good thing to pump our intuitions, because to me, this sounds very much like the free will debate. Philosophers actually will sometimes suggest that free will doesn't really exist, or that there's bridging laws to explain how things can evoke free will into existence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not sure what if you polled the philosophical community, what the numbers would be, but I think it's the majority that say, yeah, free will is not a real thing as traditionally conceptualized.
I think the as traditionally conceptualized thing is doing a lot of lifting right there, though, because not a lot of people actually put any amount of thought into the idea.
Right, but the average layperson, they think, well, I chose chocolate ice cream, but I could have chosen vanilla.
I think the average layperson is basically right about that.
We'll have to have I mean,
we'll talk about it some other day.
I mean, I don't know if there's a short way to finish that, but I think in that case, the could have means different things to different people.
Yes, like if you rewound the universe to exactly where it was before they made the choice, they would always make the exact same choice. But I don't think that's what free will means in any meaningful way.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of in the vague realm of the Dan Dennett kind of version of, there's elbow room for decision making and stuff, and I see where he's coming from, and I think that he's just talking past people who are disagreeing with him.
I think talking past each other is the majority of the majority of what happens in those debates.
Agreed. In fact, if you want to watch a good example of it in real life, or rather in audio / text, he and Sam Harris had a nice back and forth several years ago.
I remember.
Yeah, and it culminated.
That went nowhere.
Well, it disappointingly went nowhere, but it went nowhere in a nice way, because they were friends and they got along well. But Sam Harris wrote a book called Free Will, which he says this is, he gave the hard stance of free will is not a thing. Even if you look inside yourself, it's not a thing, which I liked. That was his maybe not original to the world, but original to me contribution. That even if you look inside yourself as to where your decisions come from, they're not coming from anywhere that you have any control over. So like that it's one step further than just saying determinism is true. And then Dennett wrote a response in some publication that said, this is a great book because it illustrates how bad these arguments are. And Harris was like, man, fuck you, dude. I thought we were homies. And there was some spat back and forth. But they again, there was a podcast episode, I think they recorded in a bar on Sam Harris's Waking Up podcast. And if not there, I believe it's also on his website.
I mean, a perfect example of people saying that some things don't exist because of breakdowns between computational levels and what we mean with words. Eliezer ends this post with, your inability to imagine something is just a computational fact about what your brain can or can't imagine. Another brain might work differently, which is probably where Sam Harris's and Daniel Dennett's differences actually came through.
Could be. I think it's partly maybe that Dan is more of a professional philosopher. I need to get used to using past tense, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Harris is philosophically trained, but isn't a professional philosopher. So I think he's able to just say, no, man, he's kind of able to take a Yudkowskian stance against philosophy overall. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't think Dennett would be so inclined, which is fun because Dennett clearly had a huge influence on Yudkowsky.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, moving on to angry atoms.
All right. When we're told about atoms, we visualize little billiard balls bumping into each other. This makes it seem obvious that atoms can push on things, too, by bumping into them. This is the beginning of the post, and he does give some caveats as to, like, yes, this is greatly simplified. This is not how it actually works, but, this is how we think of it, and in a simplified version, it's good enough.
Yeah, it's close enough for real life.
Yes.
For day-to-day life. But, Eneasz, what if I'm angry? I'm pissed right now, actually.
Oh, damn it.
Explain that in terms of atoms.
Yeah, how can little billiard balls be angry? Are there tiny frowny faces on the billiard balls? How can you explain angry behavior in terms of billiard balls? And I think this is exactly what happens when people who are trying to take naturalistic reductionist views to the world, try to explain themselves, try to explain consciousness and free will and things like that. They think, well, everything is just little billiard balls bouncing around. How the fuck can they be angry? Eliezer points out clearly reductionism is just a flawed notion. Obviously, we know the punchline that reductionism is actually true, and yet we still get angry, so what the fuck? He says, the novice goes astray and says, the art failed me. The master goes astray and says, I failed my art.
I love that quote, the art failed me versus I failed my art. But the danger there is that you've got to make sure you've got the right art.
Yes. Yeah, you got to actually first be sure that your art is in fact correct and not like one of those martial arts where you never touch somebody and they fall over.
Oh, yes, the bullshido.
Is that what no. All right, for just a second, I thought that might be the name until the pun hit me.
That's not what they call it, but that's what I've heard it called.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's not just the idea of like neurons that process information. If you say this and nothing more, it just inserts a magical, unexplained level crossing rule into your model where you go from billiard balls to thoughts, and it's analogous to the appendigital bridging laws, right?
Yeah.
And you can't just say, well, the password is neurons and information processing. You don't get new knowledge from that. You're not any smarter for knowing those magic words.
Exactly. He does go ahead and say, all right, I'm going to give you a tremendously oversimplified explanation that should at least reduce the apparent length of the gap. If you have chains of causality inside the mind that have a kind of mapping, a mirror, an echo, to what goes on in the environment, then you can run a utility function over the end products of imagination and find an action that achieves something which the utility function rates highly and output that action. That was a lot of words, actually, which are nice to read, but I'm not sure they make great sense if they're said out loud in a podcast.
Yeah, you're right. I don't actually find it. I don't know exactly what he's getting at there. I would talk about anger in terms of underlying biology, but actually, I still don't. I read this and I didn't have a good reductionist explanation for anger. So,
like, the underlying biology came about because what happens inside our brains is affected by the environment, and our brains can affect the environment in turn. And over long enough periods of evolution, certain triggers happen that tend to get those things to reproduce when they act in these ways, when things are a certain way in the environment.
Yeah. I mean, and some of it is because it's socially beneficial and some of it's because it's personally beneficial. You know, like we have a very natural impulse towards anger when we see great injustice.
Yeah.
And part of that might be, you know, in a Hansonian lens of just us signaling how much we care about justice. But the other part of it is like, no, I'm actually really mad. This person, quote unquote, didn't deserve that, you know, and that fairness is built really hard into our brains. You know, we're social animals.
Yeah.
It's easy to imagine that like non-social animals maybe don't have anger.
I think that may be true. It's entirely possible that snakes don't have anything like anger.
Yeah. They just have leave me the fuck alone vibes.
Yeah, right. Turned out that people who have those angry emotions, angry reactions, out-reproduce people who don't. And I guess people in this case is not the correct term. Social entities, social animals. Eliezer says, even if you knew all the facts of neurology, you would not be able to visualize the level crossing between neurons and anger. Not the way you can visualize a hand consisting of fingers, thumb, and a palm. I think that's why it was good to have that intuition pump first. Like, remember how you could cross that one simple level before? Well, this is like that, but much, much bigger, and we're going to have to do a lot more work to cross that if we want to do it. But it's essentially the same thing, so prepare yourself. Gird your loins.
It's true that the hand-finger comparison is much easier for me to grasp. Explaining anger in terms of, in reductionist terms, is a bigger challenge.
Yeah. He says even, you know, the ultimate password is hormones. So you can say anger is hormones, but even if you repeat back the words, it doesn't mean you've crossed the gap, which leads to problems. Like, people come up with interpretations like anger is mere hormones. It's caused by little molecules. So it must not be justified in any moral sense. That's why you should learn to control your anger. Or possibly even, there isn't really any such thing as anger. I've heard both those things, actually, in the real world, and they're both wrong, because, like, saying anger is merely hormones is a lot like saying a rainbow is merely the refraction of light through water droplets. Like, sure, it's true, but the things that you think that implies is not what it actually implies.
Yeah, I agree. I was trying to get ChatGPT to actually give me a good explanation here. it's not saying anything that we didn't say, but it did put one thing nicely, just as far as saying, here's the higher level view of what anger is, here's the lower level view of what anger is. And I think that's the important distinction. We've got a hand and then we've got fingers.
Yeah.
So like the higher level view is anger is the emotional state experienced as a response to perceived threats or frustrations, like we talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
The lower level components are the neural mechanisms, neurotransmitters, hormonal responses, etc. All of those things work together to make what we identify and call anger.
I get the feeling ChatGPT is not doing a good enough job bridging that inferential distance, and we would need somebody who's like a really good writer explainer like Eliezer to do all that work for us.
Or I could try longer than 5 seconds, but because the answer, anger is hormones. Even if I repeat the words back, doesn't mean I've crossed the gap, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you said, anger is mere hormones. Well, come on, that's the red flag word right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was basically the entirety of those 2 posts. They are setting up a lot, I feel, more than making conclusions, because that's the whole point of these sequence posts, to make very long series of posts into a single coherent argument to bridge an inferential gap, and we are near the beginning of this particular bridge. Spoiler, we're coming up fast on the zombies sequence, which is a classic. Everybody loves it. It argues that consciousness is actually physically real, and later on also argues that free will is physical, real thing as well. So I'm looking forward to getting to those.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I feel like I've seen somewhere where somebody, like an actual philosopher, argued to Kowski about zombieism, and I'll have to find out. Oh, I remember where it was. When we get there, I'll link to it. It was fun and frustrating. He had a Blogging Heads TV debate with Massimo Piccolucci.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I remember that dude.
Yeah, he was chill. Actually, super chill. He's a stoic.
Ah, the guys who invented chill, basically.
Yeah, exactly. They talk past each other, and even at the last, I remember like the last few sentences, there was just no charity coming from Massimo there, and I'm not sure why. And there was so much talking past each other. If you guys want a frustrating 45 minutes, I'll link to it.
I can kind of see not having a great deal of charity to someone that you don't know, like, who they are, what their deal is. You don't have a degree. Why should I take you seriously? Like, if you meet them out in the wild. But, like, if you have agreed to go on to a debate with somebody, at that point, you, I feel, are required to give them charity because you agreed to this interaction.
Agreed. No idea why they got along so poorly there.
Maybe they had an argument earlier. Maybe Eliezer accidentally ran over his dog with his car or something.
I think it's that Eliezer shits on philosophers so much, and Massimo's a professional philosopher.
That's not that's not wrong. That's a fair point. I might be similarly irked by someone who shat on the thing I love to do as much as Eliezer does.
Yeah, I think that there's a level of fairness to Yukowski's arguing against his railing against philosophy, but I think it might come off as overly dismissive of the entire enterprise of the last thousands of years. Maybe it's actually not unintentional. So,
yeah.
Anyway, what are we doing next time, Inyash?
Next time, we are reading the posts Heat versus Motion and Brain Breakthrough. It's made of neurons.
Oh, boy. Well, should be fun.
Should be a great time indeed. One final thing. We have to thank our patron, the person that brought death to you today. Today, we are thanking John Mitchell. John, thank you so much. You help make us feel like this is a thing that is valued in the world because you have given some dollars which represent the actual time you have sacrificed out of your life that you could be using for other things, and instead you used it to show us that that you find value in what we do, and I personally really appreciate that.
I mean, I personally also appreciate it.
Yes, we both. Sorry, I didn't mean to exclude you. We both really appreciate this.
No. Yeah, it means a lot, and I realize that not everyone has expendable income. If donating to the show is something that you notice on your monthly accounting, please don't sweat it. But if you have a couple of bucks to spare, you can find us on Patreon or Substack. We do have upfront costs for the show, and it's a time investment as well. So any surplus goes to paying us for our time, but we do need to. There's a couple of pieces of equipment that are nearing retirement, so this will help with that. So thanks again, we really appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Thank you. All right, Stephen, thank you for joining me. As always, this is great. I'll see you again in a couple weeks.
Sounds like a plan.
Bye.